Greetings, dear listeners. You are listening to Horror Nerds at Church, a ridiculously queer podcast where we take a deep dive into a horror film and talk about how it connects to queerness, religion, and theology. I'm Pastor Emily, and as a Coloradan, I am the unrealistic lung capacity of every single person in the crew to be able to stay underwater.
Nice. And I'm Pace, and I am the body hair that seems to come out of every single portion of Dan Hidea's tank top that he wears in that one scene. Who plays General Martin Perez, in case you're trying to figure out who that
Thank
is.
you. I was like, I don't know who that is.
So
and
much body hair.
Also, like the one clone, the one failed clone that is, it honestly reminds me of like a cyst with how much hair. It's just like hair and teeth.
Yep.
I'm Jeremy, and I am the most awkward and out of place basketball scene in horror movie history.
It really is awkward.
Oh my gosh. It was so... Yeah.
What are we doing? Like,
and I love like Sigourney Weaver trying to do basketball tricks and stuff, and like spin the ball on her finger and stuff, and they kept cutting away, like, because it's clear that she couldn't do it well. So it's like, we'll just show her start it and then pretend she's still doing it.
Yeah, that was so uncomfortable. And then like she actually did make that shot. I think before I ever saw this movie, I knew that she had actually made that shot, and apparently Ron Perlman almost ruined the take. Because if there's a slightly longer version where when she makes it, he's like, oh, and like looks into like, what, did you see that? And it completely, they had to like cut it immediately after she made the shot. Like they barely managed to salvage it.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
I love it. Well, follow us on Patreon at patreon.com/horrornerdsatchurch, or subscribe to us. It only starts at $5 to sign up, or $10 if you want to be a horror buff. But on Patreon this month, this is coming out in April. Oh, I need to pull up. I don't even know what's coming out in April.
I don't either. It's the season of Easter. Holy Week has happened. I don't know what happens after Holy Week. I don't know.
So if you are a horror buff subscriber for $10 a month, you can listen to our exclusive discussion of Star Wars Rogue One.
Yes.
If you are a $5 supporter, or a $10 supporter, you can listen to our movie commentary on The Predator, the one set on the planet where there's lots of predators, that one. Because all the names of the Predator franchise are exactly the same.
Almost as bad as Alien.
Right. Well, because they're clearly inspired by Alien in their naming. And then we also have BooTube on Ahsoka, the TV show. So all of that drop in.
Yeah, we should probably record that one at some point. The rest we recorded. We did our work during the strike to prep so that we weren't telling people, hey, go watch this on this strike company. But
also check our show notes for content warnings. I'm sure there'll be some for this episode because it's a movie. It's a movie.
Indeed.
Yeah, I don't think you can really discuss this episode without talking about some wild stuff.
Yeah. Nope. And today we are super excited to have with us our guest, Jeremy Cobb, who is an actor, writer, professional game master, and co-host of the tabletop role-playing game podcast, Three Black Halflings. And Jeremy was also raised Pentecostal by two ministers. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
We are happy to have you.
Check out Sibling Podcast Nerds at Church episode, also featuring Jeremy Cobb from their season right now.
Yeah. Yes. Our last month we had our 9th episode of the season, came out with Jeremy on Nerds at Church, which is super exciting. So, yeah, how you doing? We generally just start with a check-in. How
Oh,
are you
yeah.
doing? How is life?
Life's pretty good. As we record this, I am Three Black Halflings are gearing up for a Kickstarter to launch a new actual play series, which is essentially like a recording of us playing, in this case, Dungeons and Dragons. And so putting in, I think actually that'll be launching probably within like a week or so of this episode coming out.
Ooh, perfect
'Cause
timing.
Ooh,
yeah, we're planning it for early
nice.
April. So it's sort of
Yeah.
coincidentally, it is a gothic horror noir steampunk setting that we're doing called
Ooh.
City of the Black Rose, the Herald of Shadows. So stay tuned for that. I guess if you enjoy hearing me talk about this on this show, listen to me make some horror on Three Black Halflings and go check out the
Perfect.
Kickstarter, which should be out either now or within a couple days of now.
Nice. And if it is out, we will link to it. We will do our
And
best
show
to
notes.
link to it in some capacity
Thank
or
you.
share it. Yeah. Nice.
Okay, I'm in the midst of moving, so if my audio quality sounds different for those of you listening, that's because I don't know where my mics or headphones or anything are so right now because they're on boxes
Mm.
somewhere. So I'm kind of doing this old fashioned of just using my computer's built-in microphone and all that stuff. So I like how that's old fashioned.
Right. Meanwhile, yeah. Kay and Pace and I actually just watched our movie commentary for March, which is Apollo 13. And
Ooh.
I was commenting on their mics that there were parts where Jim Lovell, Tom Hanks' character, was like pressing the mic to his mouth and like definitely had his fingers on the mic. And I was like, you don't hear any of the muffling or anything.
Mm-mm.
Amazing. And then it was pointed out that perhaps that was actually because it was lower tech because it couldn't pick up as much. And I was like, okay. But yeah, so mics are weird.
Or maybe because it was a Hollywood film and they cut out muffles and that would
Yeah.
distract from the audience. But
I
That
mean,
also that also though reminds me of a church story, which is there was a woman who used to sing. She used to she actually was in charge of like Sunday school stuff, and she used to do a fair amount of singing and just public speaking with through Sunday school. And
mhm.
she would always tell us if you had a microphone to hold it, to place it so that it basically underneath your bottom lip, so it was touching like between your bottom lip and your chin, nestled in that little gap. uh but
Ah.
when I tried that once, I was like, not only is this creating like a sound, but also the last person who did this, their spit is still on this microphone. And so I touch it to my face and I'm like, this is wet. This is actually
no.
Yo,
gross. This is
No.
fully gross.
that is
This
why we had to sanitize all of the mics whenever we did any public events at the beginning of the pandemic. That right there.
Yep. Yep. And this was probably like a good 20 years. Well, not 20 years, but at least like 18 years ish pre-pandemic, but
Yeah.
still not good
Cool.
practice.
Yeah. Ooh,
The dog's mad about it too.
I know. They get very um they're very empathetic. So they get upset about injustices like people making you put gross microphones to your yeah. That sounds terrible.
Yeah, it's very
Really.
uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I do not know why my webcam has just decided to be
Be
out of
blurry.
focus. Here,
It
I can.
happens.
Do you want me to switch to another webcam, or are you happy for me to be just kind of blurry?
You're fine. I think we forgot to tell you. We just do audio. The video
Okay.
is just for like us and I can still make out your facial expressions and stuff,
Yep.
so I have confidence that we'll be fine with it. But yeah.
All
Yeah.
right, no problem.
Yep.
Um have you been watching or reading anything exciting or good or
Uh,
terrible besides
yes,
Alien
no,
Resurrection?
terrible. I've been reading something terrible. So for
Ooh.
the Three Black Halflings Patreon, I had mentioned I'm a big superhero fan, and Spider-Man is my favorite superhero. And at some point on our Patreon, I had mentioned I'd mentioned Spider-Man One More Day, which, if you are a fan of Spider-Man, you know is easily one of the most hated Spider-Man storylines in history. It's the thing that
Ooh.
made me stop reading superhero comics. Uh, and I mentioned that it replaced it took the title of most infamous Spider-Man story of all time from Spider-Man: The Clone Saga in the 90s. And I offered to our patrons that if they wanted, I could recount both of those storylines for them. And people said, yes, please. And so I have been reading the Clone Saga, which I'm reading it. It's the Clone Saga Complete Epic, or whatever is what it's titled. It is a 5-volume, several hundred page collection of all of the issues that pertain to the Clone
Jesus
Saga.
Christ.
It is trash.
Wow.
It is straight up trash. It's bad
Oh,
from the get go. And also the way that they compile it, they put they put the issues in the order that the events occurred rather than the order that they were released. So even though the big twist of the Clone Saga is that Peter Parker is actually the clone and Ben Reilly is allegedly the real Spider-Man, they have that as mentioned casually early on in an issue that was actually released after the twist was revealed. So if you were reading this for the first time, you'd be like, wait, what? Like, you'd be reading it along,
Yeah.
and Ben's like, yeah, that's when I thought I was still the clone and not the original. And like,
That
what on earth?
that feels a lot like people. So the other half of our podcast this season is Alien. The other half is Star Wars, and that feels like the people who have the few people in the world who have not watched, well, in the United States, who have not watched Star Wars, and then they decide to watch it starting with episode 1, and it's like,
Yeah.
this is
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Not necessarily the best starting place.
Yeah. And it's just like you totally missed the big reveal, which probably the big reveal anyway at some point, because Luke, I Am Your
I
Father is
will
like,
say, in college, we had a movie marathon of watching all, at that point, only 6 films of Star Wars, with friends. And we had a person who had seen some of the original movies like when she was a kid, but hadn't seen them since. So we were watching, but rewatched in episode order. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
mm-hmm.
And when we got to 3, and Darth Sidious refers to Anakin as Darth Vader for the first time, she screamed and she was like, "What? That kid is Darth Vader?" I was like, "Oh my god, it is so rare to get that these
Yeah.
days. Not many
That's
people
fair.
know that. Or not many people still are not aware of that twist." So,
Yeah.
as a
Yeah.
moment,
That's fair. That's a good alternative twist. I like it.
yeah.
I feel like there's so few people would have experienced, because I don't even think George Lucas planned for it to be a twist. I think it was meant to be a moment where people were like, "Oh man, yeah, there it is." But instead, that because most people I feel
Yeah.
like who know who Darth Vader is probably also know that he's Anakin Skywalker, or know that he's Luke Skywalker's dad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
that's wild. I'm glad she had that experience though. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's see. As far as what I've been watching, oh, I've been still watching a lot of Doctor Who. That's mostly what I've been watching.
Oh
So I'm in my Doctor Who. Emily and I are trying to watch all of Doctor Who in a year.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Um, Classic series and revived series. This is my second watch through of it, and I'm on the Abominable Snowman in the second Doctor's run, and
Nice. I'm on
love.
season 3 in Classic Who.
Yay!
A miracle. I've never
So
been this far in Classic Who.
I'm enjoying the second Doctor. When I first watched Doctor Who, my first, like, about 15 years ago, was my favorite of the classic Doctors, and
Mm.
I still very much enjoy him. As far as what I'm reading, so much for my dissertation, so I'm not going to bore you all with the deep, nerdy theological and queer theory books, but I just
Those are not the
finally,
boring ones, just so you know.
yeah, well,
The
Yeah, I was
but
about to say
deepological,
I'm
queer,
down. Like, I
nerdy
would
ones.
totally listen. This sounds great.
Yeah.
yeah, but I just finished though. If you want to follow my Goodreads, I'll link that in the show notes so you can kind of see. I'm not a huge fan of Goodreads because of Amazon, but it's one
Yeah.
of the better places to keep track of that. So I'll
Mm-hmm.
post that in there. But I just finally finished, from a certain point of view, Return of the Jedi today, which, if you've been listening, you know that Emily and I have been trying to record this, finish reading this book and record it since beginning of January, somewhere around there. So
I
it
mean,
took us a bit.
technically, we were gonna do all 3 books in the fall because they're books and not movies, but we didn't quite do that.
Yeah.
Somebody had an iron deficiency. I don't know who. Both of us. Both of
Yep.
us, but I got mine treated, so
Mine wasn't, but that's a
yeah.
story for another day. Yay.
Yeah.
Transphobia and healthcare.
Speaking of horror stories, so one of the things that we do on this podcast is ask people about real life church horror stories. I did a transition. I'm so proud of
You
myself.
did. I'm so proud.
That was a solid transition too.
I know, it's amazing. It's really miraculous when it happens. So then I have to name it just to make sure people know, which kind of ruins the transition. But,
In fact, speaking of horror stories and transitions, it was a stealth. It was a stealth double pun.
Brilliant. Yeah, totally, all on purpose. So when we have guests on our podcast, Jeremy, we usually invite them to share a real life church horror story, and this could be supernatural kind of church horror stories. It could be really bad theology, church people being shitty. It's the whole gamut. So if you have one, we'd love to hear a church horror story from you.
All right. Okay. So I got several. And honestly, even as you were just saying that, I was like, oh, I got even more. Would you rather hear one that is like a spooky? Would you rather hear one that's theological? Would you rather hear one that's like a personal, or would you rather hear one that's just scary?
All of the above. I mean,
I know, as I got. We're non-binary. You can't make us decide these things.
There we go.
We
Yeah.
don't choose.
Okay, so I said spiritual first. So this is I'm assuming that a lot of your listenership knows this, but growing up in Pentecostalism, this is not widely known information, which is that there are no unambiguous references to Satan in the Old Testament. There is no character, just contrary to what most of Christianity would believe, there is not really a clear Satan figure until you get to the New Testament. And even then it just seems to be a different dude than whatever was showing up in the Old Testament. And even further than that, his name isn't Lucifer, most likely, because like I discovered that by reading the passages that people base it on, and Lucifer is just a guy. Lucifer's not a guy. Lucifer's the planet Venus in the original text. It's I was getting it mixed up with another passage that's talking about a king that is also used to refer to Satan. But like Lucifer is known to be a mistranslation that when I think it's when it was either the translators of the Vulgate or the people who were translating the Vulgate into English didn't realize that Lucifer was not a proper noun. And then so they said it must be like a person, but Lucifer actually refers to the planet Venus. And the talking about Lucifer trying to make himself like God and then being cast down is, I think, generally interpreted as a reference to the motion of the planet Venus in the sky. It's the brightest planet in the night sky.
The morning star.
Yeah, and based on its orbit, it appears to move towards the sun and then fall away from it. And so people were comparing an earthly king to the planet Venus, saying that, oh, you tried to make yourself like God, but were cast down. There's never any mention of any sort of like satanic figure during that passage. It wasn't until I think until around maybe even after the Bible was compiled in the whether you use AD or CE, that people started to interpret that as being a reference to Satan. And so that whole basically the church's beliefs about Satan and demons and all that tend to be, let's just say, very non-biblical.
It's a little bit like fan fiction, we say.
Yeah. I like it.
Yeah.
I love fanfic.
Lots of headcanons. That's the first story that I have. Would you like to hear the others still?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Okay. So a personal one. The I had my childhood youth pastor who is a solid dude. Like, he's a good youth pastor. In fact, I would say in many ways he's a very good youth pastor. He's really good at putting together events. He's really good at like engaging with the kids. A lot of the kids who were in the church, I think, really were coming in part because they liked him so much. Like, especially if their families
Mm,
were not really in the church. Some of the kids in the youth group whose families may not have attended the church as often were coming in part just because of like he himself was such a magnetic figure. But
mm.
he and I had a series of run-ins. I think just because of like his family knew my family, and he and I went way, way back. And I think there was like a sense of competition, even though he was like in his 20s and
Mm.
30s and I was a teenager. Uh,
Ooh,
but
I love when that happens.
yeah, yeah.
Male youth pastors, so mature.
Yeah,
Mm,
and it came up like the three most notable examples. I'll try and be quick. Was he was a huge tennis fan,
Mm,
and I was too at the time. And he and I were having some argument about like Roger Federer or Rafael Nadal back when I was in high school. I was like 17 when this happened, and I had to stop texting to go to play practice. I had rehearsal. I had to go
mhm,
and rehearse for like 4 hours on this for a play,
mhm.
and so I turned my phone off, went to rehearse, and when I came back, he had sent me, I think, 16 consecutive unanswered messages, getting increasingly upset at me for not responding, which at the time I was like, wow, this seems excessive. Now that
yeah.
I'm an adult, I'm like, bro, what are you doing? Like, this
Oh,
is, why are you
yeah.
getting so upset? Like, even if I
It's
had just
like
been blowing him
toss
off,
the flags. Like, whoa.
yeah, chill out. Like, this is a kid you're getting all upset about that he disagrees with you on tennis. It's not like I called him a name and then turned off my phone. I just was like, yeah, I don't agree. We were having just a discussion about tennis. So that was like one of the first instances. And then we eventually had in the whole thing came to kind of a head when I left. Well, he had left the church that I grew up in to go to teach at another go and be a youth pastor at another church in another state, and I ended up going
Mm,
to that state for
hmm,
college in part because I knew that church was there and was like, oh, okay, I'd be able to attend that
there's a
church. They have a
church that
good
you could
church
call.
nearby. And his wife actually worked at the school that I was attending, and
Hmm,
so he kind of like was my once in future youth pastor. And so I I ended up leaving that school to go to drama school in the UK.
mhm,
And he and I had like the impetus for the argument, I think, was kind of justified because it was due to like personal problems that were unrelated to the other stuff that we'd had.
mhm.
But it started as that, but somehow turned into this, I'm not exaggerating, a 5-hour phone conversation where like every single thing that had bothered him about me just got brought out, including
Oh,
like
wow.
he was like, you can't, like, me being an actor, he was not okay with that. Like me, he was like, you can't be an actor because what if you're asked to play somebody who does something wrong? What And
Oh,
I'm
my
like, but
grandma used that on me.
yeah, it's like you just pretend. I don't know what to tell you, man.
Like,
Right?
And he
acting.
yeah, and I guess he had spoken to a woman who had been a professional actor and was like, I couldn't do it because if I was asked to play a character who was too dark, it would affect me personally. And I was like, I don't know that's not everybody's experience. It was, and then it turned into like all this personal stuff. It really fractured the relationship. I think I was 22 when that conversation took place. So he would have been in his
Wow.
like mid to late 30s. And that one, like, it felt like how an earthquake is like a releasing of tension that causes devastation. It felt like
Mhm.
a powerful earthquake that for me really wrecked that relationship. uh
Yeah.
and so to this day I just don't really, I just like it didn't seem to do it for him. Like, he seemed fine, but I came away from it being like, dude, this
Oh,
was
yeah.
terrible.
Well,
Yeah.
and like, there's such a power imbalance. Your youth director gives me the creeps
Hmm.
and sends up lots of red flags, particularly about like potentially grooming. Like
Hmm.
the way he
Yeah.
reacted to you ignoring him is like, I don't know, that's scary. But also the like the power dynamic of I had like not a youth director, but like a young life leader who like told me how wrong my mom was because she was like working or something, and like wanted me to have good Christian women to be like role models. And there's like a million things wrong with that I didn't even know at the time because I didn't know I was non-binary. But like the power dynamic of someone who is in a spiritual authority position over you, whether you're still a youth or you're in your 20s, right? Like to just
Mhm.
lay into how terrible something is that you're doing, and that like something that is not actually terrible, and that is like this beautiful, I would say call from God, right? Like this beautiful call to put creativity out in the world, and then to just be like, no, this is awful, and then okay, we're fine. And it's like, no, you don't understand. You did a lot of harm when you said that. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. It felt like it drove because obviously Pentecostalism has I would imagine a reputation for being very conservative, well deserved, having grown up in it. And I think my biggest issue with it, with his behavior, was not that he disagreed. I actually don't necessarily have a problem with him saying, I personally, based on what I know about acting, think these things. It's
mm-hmm,
the fact that he wasn't willing to listen. Like in the conversation, he was so entrenched that he wouldn't
mm-hmm,
even allow me really to say, like, but this is my experience. This is
yeah,
what I understand acting to be. This is what it is for me. It was like, nope, nope, you're wrong. It was just stonewalling. Um, I
Oof.
think
Yeah.
I think as far as the grooming aspect goes, obviously I haven't talked to him in a very long time, so I can't speak to what anything that has happened since. I can say at the time, I've never heard of any of that kind of behavior. I think
yeah,
that his behavior, even though it did seem weirdly possessive, I think that it was because he was hyper competitive,
mm,
and he felt insecure around me. I think it was. I
yeah,
think he felt insecure in conjunction, like in connection with me specifically, because I never saw him have those kinds of problems with other people in the youth group. I know that
mm,
he has since
yeah.
had problems like that with some of my friends who are now adults, because they disagreed with him on political or sports issues, and it eventually got to the
Yeah,
point where they were like, "All right, I gotta stop talking to this guy about this because this is getting out of hand, man. This is
Yeah.
what are
yeah,
we doing?" But
yeah,
I don't think that he was. I don't think that there was a grooming element, but I do completely agree with the power imbalance aspect that was being
yeah,
completely unacknowledged. I think, and
yeah,
completely unrecognized on his part. And it really was like that today. To this day, I'll like see posts by like his wife or something on Facebook, and I'll think like, oh, I still have love for him and for that family, but I
mm-hmm,
can't in good conscience subject myself to trying to engage with him again just because
Yeah.
it's just not healthy. It's just not a
yeah,
healthy
Mhm.
relationship to have.
yeah,
So yeah, I have
yeah,
also a spooky horror story that is not
Please share
yeah,
that
as
one too.
yeah.
Yeah. Keep it going.
So this one takes place in the UK. I was not a witness to this, but my mother knew apparently the people who were involved with it during a church service. They were singing. I think they were singing and praise and worshiping God, and there was suddenly a shriek and a scream and a smash of glass from the far side of the building, and people looked,
ooh,
and apparently a woman who was allegedly demon possessed, though nobody knew it going into this, had flung herself, or rather been flung by the demons, a good 15-20 feet into the air, partially through a window that she like realistically could not have normally reached, and her ankle was like severely injured by the cut glass. uh
ooh,
Wow.
yeah, it was
That
wild.
is scary.
yeah,
It is amazing how many demon possession stories we get on this podcast with that question. So I personally love it, even though it's absolutely terrifying at the same time.
yeah.
Yep.
It's oh, yeah,
Yeah.
that would be scary.
Yeah.
Almost as scary as the plot of this movie.
Oh, they are on a roll.
Whoa.
They're on a roll.
Right? You need to switch the shirt to 2NB to not transition now, Emily, the way you're going.
I know. We
So,
have a merch store that has merch that says 2NB to transition and 2NB not to transition.
so
It's for everybody.
well,
Mhm.
this movie though, Alien Resurrection, directed by Jean-Pierre Jeunet, came out in 1997, written by Joss Whedon.
Which
Um,
explains so
right?
much.
We'll get there. We'll get there. Don't worry, listeners.
I didn't know until like halfway through when Pace and I were watching, like halfway through watching it. Then Pace mentioned Joss Whedon, and I was like,
Yeah.
all the
It's
pieces.
Buffy in space. That should have been my one sentence summary. Anyway,
Yeah.
I hadn't thought of that, but you're 100% correct.
right. So, so I find this interesting, kind of like we did with the first Alien movie, which came out 2 years after Star Wars, the first Star Wars. This movie came out about 2 years after George Lucas said that he was returning to work on the prequel trilogy. So listen to the amount of space movies that came out to anticipate the Star Wars phenomena. So first of all, the Star Wars special editions, for better or worse. I know people Han shot first, all that stuff, but those came out this year, 1997, and 20th anniversary of the original. So all three of them. But then also space themed, we have Men in Black, Leprechaun
Mhm.
4 in space. I cannot wait to cover the Leprechaun franchise.
I'm just
Contact.
excited there's a space version of it. I
Yep.
have no idea about the Leprechaun
It's
series,
trash,
so
but anyway, Contact, The Fifth Element, Multipass, and Event Horizon, which we covered on season 1,
Mhm.
Gattaca, and Starship Troopers. So huge space year in theaters.
Gattaca was so good. I remember Gattaca.
But
what an array of classics. The
right,
Fifth
right.
Element, Gattaca, Starship Troopers, all in
I
one
also,
year?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I also feel like Titan AE or whatever came out this year, but I'm pretty sure it was 1998, so maybe the year after.
Mm.
But
Mm.
anyway, but then we have Emily. I'm pretty sure will know all of these. Maybe we had Titanic, The Lost World, Jurassic Park,
Mhm.
007, Tomorrow Never Dies, Good Will Hunting, As Good as It Gets, Batman and Robin, Disney's Hercules, Air Force One, and Good Burger all came out this year.
I don't actually. I
Oh,
know Disney's Hercules, but I've never actually seen it, and I
oh,
don't know
interesting.
Air Force One or Good Burger.
Mm.
Oh,
I feel
oh,
like I should know As Good as It Gets, but I'm not sure.
As Good
It's
as It
not
Gets
my
is a
best
good
figure.
movie.
movie.
You should
Uh,
watch Good Burger. It is amazing. Love it.
yeah,
One of my favorite comedy. But I grew up on Nickelodeon, so I mean,
Wait,
yeah,
is it from all that?
yeah,
yeah. Keenan
it's
and
the
Kel.
sketch, but they made a full length movie of it with
I did
Keenan and
not
Kel
realize they
starring
made
in
a
it.
full length movie of that. That
Yeah,
would bring
Yeah,
yeah,
back memories.
and I think they're
Okay.
releasing a sequel. Am I
yep,
correct? Like
yep,
they just like released a trailer for a sequel.
yeah. I'm so stoked for
Now
that.
I have to watch Good Burger so I can watch Good Burger too. Oh my gosh, that would be. Yep,
Yeah,
that's. I mean, I'm preaching this weekend, but literally, after Sunday morning,
yeah.
that's my new
And
weekend.
then in horror slash thriller realm, we have Face Off, The Relic, Anaconda, Volcano, Snow White, A Tale of Terror, which also has Sigourney Weaver in it.
Hmm.
Casper, A Spirited Beginning. We watched the first movie on season 5, so you can check that out. Wishmaster, the 90s classic, I Know What You Did Last Summer. Midnight in the Garden of Evil, of Good and Evil, and Scream 2, another 90s classic, some people's favorite Scream movie, and
Hmm.
An American Werewolf in Paris.
We should do a fairy tale season,
Ooh,
We probably will. Yeah.
yeah, like a Pan's
We-
Labyrinth and some of the other like dark.
right.
Yeah,
right? And you get
Return
so,
to Oz,
especially
that
I
because
love that
weird.
movie. That's such a good movie,
Yeah, yeah.
all right,
and it
done.
absolutely has strong horror overtones.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah,
Perfect.
I love that
Perfect.
movie. Should I
Yeah.
read what I added as well? The
Yes,
Yeah.
additional context,
please.
yes. Okay, so we mentioned Joss Whedon wrote this film,
Mhm.
but he was not yet a household name because that would come probably a few years after this. This movie debuted the same year as Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Mm.
So I wonder. I know that Joss Whedon said that even though they followed his script, he thought they executed it very poorly. I wonder if if Buffy had already come out, if he would have had more power to leverage to be like, you guys got to follow my script more. And then the other piece of context is the director, Jean-Pierre Jeunet, is also the director of the classic 2000s film Amelie. What on earth?
Right, one of my favorite
Very
movies,
different.
honestly.
Yeah, I actually auditioned to be in Amelie the Musical a few years
wow.
ago. Yeah. It's a classic.
Nice.
I didn't even
Yeah.
know there was a music. I should have known that, though,
Yeah.
considering it's one
Yeah.
of my
The
favorites.
musical is not a classic. I want to be clear. The musical is not a classic. The movie is a classic.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah.
So when was the first time you have seen this film? To be clear, Alien Resurrection, Alien 4. When was the first time you
Yes.
seen that?
Alien Resurrection, I first saw for the first time last year.
Mm.
I was doing research because I was planning, and still kind of am planning, an Alien RPG actual play series. And so, in order to like make my own, I was like, I need to watch. At that point I had only seen Alien and Aliens. I had not seen. I'd also seen Prometheus and Alien Covenant, but you know, I don't know how much
I
inspiration I would
haven't seen
necessarily.
either of those two, so
Yeah, I don't know that you need to.
I
To be
think I
honest.
am going to.
Yeah,
I don't
we
know.
Oh
have
yeah,
to
I
for
guess
the
yeah.
podcast, but
Yeah, I guess you have to.
Yeah.
There's some good stuff in there, I guess. Michael Fassbender's performance as David, especially in the first, like
right,
in Prometheus, is good. Like that's
Okay.
really
yeah,
good.
yeah. And there is a scene in Prometheus that, horror wise, is genuinely alarming. It's the one in the pod. I think you know what I'm
Yeah,
talking about, Pace. Yeah, my friend, I saw that movie in the theater with my friend, and he was like fully like, I don't know what he got like fully like triggered, like he was like shaking, and like
Ugh.
that
yeah,
scene is rough. That scene, because I think it was in 3D too, so it was
yep.
Oh
like,
wow.
oh
That's like extra.
yeah,
I
that
saw.
movie.
Well, we'll get there when we get to Prometheus, but I saw it for the first time in theaters with my ex, who also is not a horror person. And I convinced him to see it because I'm like, it's set in space. It's not really that scary. No wonder we got divorced. No, it's not that reason. But
Oh
I was gonna say
boy.
that is not why.
Oh
But
boy.
whew,
yeah,
Yeah.
mismatch.
Yeah. So last year
Yeah.
I went and watched Alien 3, which the version that I saw was not the theatrical cut. I didn't
The
realize
assembly
this.
cut is
Yeah,
so
yeah.
much better.
Yeah. I was like,
oh,
this isn't great, but this isn't that bad. Like this is
yeah.
solid. I liked it.
Yeah, so we watched for the podcast, and I think one of them is about to come out or just came out. I don't know. We
Alien
watched
3 just came out, and the
Yeah.
assembly cut will come out in 2 weeks.
Yeah. So we watched them both one after the other, and the first, like the theatrical release, I was like, I can't even follow this. It is so like disjointed and all of this stuff. And then we watched the assembly cut, and I was like, oh my gosh, I kind of like this movie. It's
Yeah.
actually a good movie.
Yeah, the
so
examination
good.
of like religion and stuff and faith and
Mhm.
how, yeah, like I like the idea of the redemptive power that religion has had on this group of dudes. That they're
Yeah.
like, and the idea of like them paying penance and the self-sacrifice themes, and even like Alien Ripley dying in cruciform at the end. Like,
Right? Yeah.
they really drive home. I would say part of what I like about it is that it's, in contrast to I think most Hollywood movies that deal with spiritual stuff, it deals with it from like a more charitable perspective. That's like, it's not
Mm.
perfect, but it can produce really like faith and religion can produce good outcomes for people. They can
Mhm.
genuinely help people grow.
Yeah.
So then I watched this, and did not much care for it. I thought, I think my main takeaway from this movie is it would have been fine had it not been an Alien movie. I think the fact that it's an
Ooh,
Alien
yeah.
movie is like, it just completely, this shouldn't be an Alien movie. This should just be like a weird
I think,
space action horror comedy.
yeah, I think I agree with you on that. I like that.
I could see that.
Yeah.
What about you, Emily? Are we getting a shot for this?
Yes, shots all around. My first time was watching it was, in fact, last night for this episode.
Oh boy.
So, as with all of the Alien movies this season, I am watching them for the first time for our podcast.
What have you thought of them so far?
It's fascinating. I'm starting to like get the hang of some horror tropes, which is helpful because this is the first time that we've had like a couple jump scares. Not for this one, but in the Alien movies. We're keeping track of my jump scares. Everybody's jump scares technically, but I don't think Pace has ever had a jump scare, so
There is one movie I had a jump scare for, but it was Saved.
That's right.
Which scene in
Pace had a
Saved
jump scare
brought
for
that
on
Saved.
the pool. I was like, oh my god. Oh yeah.
And one
Anyway.
time, one of my jump scares was actually Gandalf barking.
Yeah.
And like while we were watching for a movie commentary.
My dog's name is Gandalf, not the
Oh,
actual
yeah.
Gandalf showing up and being like,
I
"You
was like,
shall not
okay.
pass," because that would give me a jump
You
scare.
shall
Yeah, I was
not
like,
pass.
what movie was like? Which of the three?
So,
Go back to the shadows.
yes.
Love it.
Yeah. So I have mostly liked it. Sigourney Weaver, like Ripley, is fantastic, and from the start, it has been clear that like this is one of the times where Sigourney Weaver is cast as a character that is not designed to be a woman, which is to say, the original character was a man. And then they cast Sigourney Weaver. And so instead of like changing everything to make it more damsel-y, they just let her be her. And I love that part of it. I have up until this movie loved that the assholes always die, and like the people who completely ignore and dismiss, right? Like there is so much misogyny, so much sexism everywhere, and then Ripley's like the correct one. She's like, this is the protocol, this is what we have to do, and everybody that doesn't follow her wisdom and knowledge and expertise dies.
Yeah.
And I love that until this movie. There's a point where I like reference and I'm like, oh, this happens to my will be favorite kill, and he lived. And I was like,
as a side note,
I'm not okay.
Did y'all know that Veronica Cartwright's character is trans in the first movie?
Oh, I did not.
She is canonically trans. It's not said in that movie, but in Aliens, there's a sequence where they're showing the crew and they're showing each of their like little blurbs about them, and it doesn't use the word trans, but it specifically mentions that she had I guess gender affirming surgery. I think it like mentions that she's like male to female. Like it actually says in the movie on screen. It's only there for a second.
Go back and
yeah, I'll see if I can find it really quickly for you, so I can just send it to you.
Yeah.
But yeah.
While you look for that, the first time while this movie came out in theater, so the drinking game is, Jeremy, is that if Emily has not seen the movie before the podcast, you take a shot. If I have watched the film before the age of 12, because I grew up on horror movies, you take a shot. And while this movie did hit theaters when I was, I want to say 11, right? No, or 12. I probably was 12 when it hit theaters. I did not actually see this movie until like 2 or 3 years ago myself. So, no shot for Pace this time.
Disappointing, Pace. This is a rarity.
I know.
It came out in time, and yet Joan Lambert. Okay, now I'm like super curious. Oh.
Yeah, I found a link. So I guess in the actual thing, she's not. I don't know that she intentionally transitioned because it says it actually happened at birth. But it says so far no indication of suppressed traumas related to gender alteration. And then it talks about it goes into more detail, but her character, I guess, was born male, and then I don't know what Despin convert means because they don't talk about that at all. But I guess she underwent some surgery as a child, as a baby, and is just a woman now, and appears to be fine with that.
Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah.
Cool.
I also wonder a little bit because when the movie came out, like the understandings of intersex people were basically non-existent, and I wonder if that's like trying to get at that too would be another option. But fascinating. Learn something.
Right.
Yeah. I like what you pointed out, Emily, about the dynamics of the previous, especially Aliens, because Alien, everybody's just kind of chill. Like Alien, everybody's just like, we're a bunch of working class stiffs hauling stuff
Yeah.
through. Like there's nobody's trying. There's not really much in the way of gender dynamics. Like you could have theoretically had anybody in that movie be any gender. I feel like. For the
Mhm.
most part, so like maybe the very end when Ripley strips down to her underwear, because that I don't know would hit the same if it was a guy. I feel like that was probably put in because she was played by a woman.
Mm.
That's my thinking. But in the sequel, Aliens, it's like all like macho
Like
Marines.
military.
Yeah, it's the most macho dudes, and then
Mhm.
the only guys that survive that movie are the I guess the positive masculinity, Michael Bean's character, who's just respectful and nice, and
Mhm.
then Bishop, who's just like
Mhm.
he's a chill. I'm not even sure. I mean, I guess he has a gender because he's an android, but it's not. He doesn't identify with all of the same like
Yeah.
macho aesthetic.
Yeah.
And it's the whole. It's about like by the end you have two moms duking it out over the fate of their
Mhm.
children. So yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah.
And we
That's
totally missed
yeah.
that in this movie.
Right.
I just kept waiting for them to die, and then they killed all the people of color, which
True.
as
There were
we
only like two. Two.
yeah,
Yep.
there were only
This is
two.
very white future
It
Yep.
in
really
this world.
and we
Um,
know from our episode last year / last season, um, the black guy always dies first. So we know this. That was we did a mini-sode last year. That's what I'm trying to remember.
mhm.
With Robin Means Coleman and
Mark
Mark
Harris.
Harris, yes,
Yep.
who are the authors of The Black Guy Dies First, which is
Hmm.
all about
Yeah, go check
horror,
that. Really good.
recent horror. Um, so we'll link to that in the show notes, folks. Which is to say, Pace will magically find it. Mm,
Way to
Or
go,
not.
Pace.
We'll see.
we'll see. We'll try.
uh,
Yeah, yeah, but they like kill all the people of color, and then it like just like really
well, let's. Speaking
okay.
of
Sorry, we'll
something, I don't know how to do this. Speaking
I'm done with my
speaking of the
transitions. It's all
weirdness
you.
of the speaking of the weirdness of the script, here's some background. So, oh my
This
god,
is more like our transitions.
yeah. So Joss Whedon was hired to write the script, and he was hired because Fox, 20th Century Fox, now 20th Century, thanks Disney, was impressed with his script writing and script doctoring skills. He did several treatments, including a treatment for the Superman movie that never came out that would have had Nicolas Cage as Superman. Um, but he did the Buffy the Vampire Slayer film, which I love, and Emily still has not seen. But that came out, I think, 94 or something. So anyway, he was starting to make a name for himself, and also with Buffy being in production at this point and soon to be released. Um, so they hired him and brought him on board, and he wrote his initial draft was going to have Newt be the clone and return from Aliens because
Whoa.
Ripley died, and it was clear that Sigourney Weaver had no interest in returning. She thought her character arc was done, so it was originally focused around her. But the Fox
Interesting.
Studios were like, "Well, maybe if we throw a lot of money at her, we can convince her to return." So they talked to her. They said, "Sigourney Weaver, will you come back, please?" And so she met with Joss Whedon, read the script. She loved the idea of her character being part alien and part human, and
Hmm.
she thought that would add to her character's dimension. So she signed on also as co-producer and was paid 11 million. She deserved every penny of that. And that, by the way, is 15% of the entire budget of the film went to Sigourney Weaver's salary.
Wow.
Right.
Oh wow.
Wow. Okay.
Yep. Jean-Pierre Jeunet was brought on. He's mostly known in the US, as we talked about, for Amelie and also A Very Long Engagement. But listen to some of these directors that were considered before he was brought on. Peter Jackson, Bryan
Mm,
Singer, who we don't like anymore, but
okay.
and Danny Boyle, all approached to direct.
Mm.
I wonder what the film would have been like under each of their directing helms. Um, the
Definitely
half
better if it was
human,
Peter Jackson. I feel like Peter
Right.
Jackson just has better horror chops.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And
Peter
then
Jackson's the only one I know.
Bryan Singer
I don't know
directed
the names
the
of
original
people.
X-Men movie from 2000
Yeah, he
Oh.
did
and
X-Men,
X-Men
X-Men 2.
2,
Yeah, he did
Wait,
stuff like that.
Days of Future
and we
Past
don't
and
like.
Apocalypse.
I liked the
The
X-Men.
movies are
Why don't
good.
we like him?
He's a pedophile. That's the reason you don't like him.
Yeah,
Oh
he's just
no!
an evil man.
Yeah.
He's a
Yeah, I don't
talented
like him.
evil
Okay,
man.
Yeah.
well
And Danny
that's good
Boyle
to
did
know.
Train Spotting and a few other, I can't remember. Oh, he did 28 Days Later, right? That was Danny
Yeah,
Boyle
Oh,
too.
28 Days
I've
later.
And
seen that one.
Sunshine.
I've
Yeah,
seen that one. Not for
Slumdog
And
Millionaire.
Sunshine, Emily, and Sunshine. You've seen
Yeah,
I
some.
saw that for the podcast.
he's
Yeah.
Danny Boyle's got a quite the filmography. He's got some really good
Yeah, I
stuff.
would have loved to see his version of this too. Speaking of horror chops,
Mhm.
um, the half human alien thing born at the end. If you can look up models of the actual puppet that they used, and it included human sex organs on the model, and you can see pictures of it. But it was edited
Hmm.
out of the film with CGI because Fox Studios was like, no. So
Yeah, they
they
were like
edited
bright
that out.
red.
Yeah, it's like really inflamed vulva and penis, it looks
Oh
like.
gosh.
And then
I mean,
there
I appreciate that they edited it out, but yeah.
in that there's a novelization of this movie by A.C. Crispin, who is most well known for her Han Solo trilogy, which also came out in 1997,
Mm.
and her Star Trek novels. And she's the only
Ah,
writer of the Alien franchise novelizations to be a woman. So props to her.
huh.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, do you have a one sentence summary of this film?
Yeah, I do. My one sentence summary is someone watched too many Paul Verhoeven and Terry Gilliam movies and decided that Alien should be like that, except worse. Uh, if you're not familiar with those
Solid.
people, Paul Verhoeven did RoboCop. He did Total
Mhm.
Recall and Starship Troopers, which came out the same year as this movie. Terry Gilliam did. He directed. I think he co-directed Monty Python and the Search for the Holy Grail. I don't
Oh.
think they let him help direct Life of Brian, but he did Brazil. He did Dr. Munchausen. He did 12 Monkeys. He's had
Yeah.
a heck of a career, Terry Gilliam.
And the way that, and you mentioning Paul Verhoeven especially makes me laugh because honestly, I feel like this movie would fit in the same universe as Starship Troopers so well. It's like
Yeah.
very much similar themes and the way the
Hmm.
military is and the hyper masculinities and all that stuff. Agreed.
Yeah. What about you, Pace?
Mine is space is resurrected or refunded, rebudgeted. Not quite sure what's going on here.
Mine is robots are the humane ones, which is to say the one robot. Also, our collective podcast one sentence summary is Buffy in space.
Yes.
Yep.
And you can take a shot because Emily's is shorter for once. Or don't take a shot.
Hey.
No. Take a shot either way.
Mine is never shorter.
I have water that I'm just going to be taking a shot of.
Same.
That's what I have right now too, because that's the day it is.
Well, we can roll through this movie then with some of our.
Mhm.
This is a part where we just basically talk about some of our favorite moments, all that stuff before we get into our theology stuff. Or some of our least favorite moments, to be clear, because there are a lot of those in this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's very little.
And I'll just start.
Yeah, go for
Yeah.
it.
I'll just start off by saying the tone of this movie is so fucking muddled. Like sometimes it feels very camp comedy, which is something that Whedon is known for, like this weird, like comedic campiness, which is very unlike any other Alien movie thus far. But other times it tries to be action sci-fi, kind of like the other ones in this, and horror. But sometimes they like to have this well-intended drama, but it falls flat because like it's hard to take anything in this movie seriously because of the camp comedic themes going throughout it. That it's like when you try to have these more serious moments, it just doesn't really land well, I think.
Yeah.
So.
I feel like sometimes, like, there are really great ways to blend comedy and drama, and
Joss Whedon is not skilled enough to do that. Sorry. That's my hot take on that, man.
Ooh.
yeah. Yeah. Also, they identify themselves by breath, which, whole new meaning to breath spray. But, like,
Breathalyzers.
I was like,
Yeah. The scene where Call is just
weird.
spraying different like breath things, like which one works?
Which one's the right breath? Yeah. I was like, oh gosh, but that,
I
knowing
also
now that
wonder
she's a
how.
robot, I'm like,
Yeah.
okay.
I do wonder how Call got all those little mini breath air freshener things, though. Like, did she just go around and like
Yeah.
capture people as breathing or something? I'm very confused and
She's
interested.
a robot. She could, like, sneak in or something.
While they're all asleep and like put like a
Yeah.
little like a paper bag over their mouths and then like just take it and put it
Yep.
in a little canister. Yeah. I pace the tone of this movie is the number one thing that has me just like, what are we doing here? Like, what from the opening shot,
Mhm.
from the opening shot of the film, where it's like it looks like a xenomorph mouth, and then it zooms out, and it's actually a bug, and then a dude smushes it, and then he has like the goofiest, like this face does not belong in an alien film. Like flicking it,
Right?
trying to get it off his finger, shoots it into the like he puts on the straw, shoots it in the windshield. Like all that whole sequence is what are we do? What is this? Why are we starting this movie this way? And
Yeah.
right down to like the performances, because a lot of my notes are about like it's in the same vein. Like Ron Perlman's performance in particular is so big. It feels like it belongs in a Terry Gilliam movie, or even or a Paul Verhoeven movie, or what's his name? It's his most famous collaborator, Guillermo del Toro. It feels like it belongs in a
Yeah.
Guillermo del Toro movie, where it's like big and
Mm.
campy and like kind of weird and goofy, but like self-consciously cool and stuff. Like that shouldn't be in an alien film. It's too
Right.
Also, he
much.
should die.
Yes, I also agree. I completely agree. But it's
He
not.
was one of my candidates for favorite kill,
Yeah,
but
But then he
then
didn't die.
he
he's
didn't die. And, like, if you're gonna have that big of a misogynist asshole, he has to die.
yeah. He's
Unless the
more.
writer is a big misogynist asshole, and then
Yep.
And then he is.
He's honestly, I would say he's worse than any of the Space Marines. The only guy in
right.
Aliens who's worse than him would probably be like the corporate stooge, who like
Yeah.
that guy's horrible, but like he's easily more obnoxious than any of the Space Marines from Aliens, and yet
Mhm.
we lose all of them, and this dude skates by. And he's also
Yeah.
like ableist. Like I think we're like introduced to him by when he throws a knife into the leg
Right.
Right.
of his paraplegic crew member. What are we
Yeah.
doing?
Yeah. But
Just to see if he would feel it. It's like, Jesus Christ, dude.
Yeah.
yeah. Which, like, I do appreciate for that character. I do appreciate the way that they don't magically fix everything, right? There's a trope in there's an ableist trope in a lot of fiction of, like, magically fixing disabilities. And so, like, it matters that he cannot feel his legs, and it matters to the plot to a certain extent
Mm-hmm.
that he cannot feel his legs. And I really like that because that doesn't happen nearly enough, where, like, it actually impacts things. But then also, like, the way that people are like, well, we're just gonna, like, well, we gotta leave him behind, and it's just like,
Well, Ron Perlman specifically is like, let's leave him
Yep.
behind.
yep. And then I love Christy. Christy is one of my favorite male characters, because there's only, like, basically one of them. But, like, his, like, okay, we're gonna do this, and just, like, straps him on the back, and there they go. And then like that they switch positions when they have to switch positions, and then ultimately, like, self-sacrifice. But yeah,
But
Ron Perlman's character is
speaking of people
horrible.
that make it to the end, though, the disabled guy makes it to the end. How rare is that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then
that
gets
was-
kissed by Ron Perlman. Did y'all
Who
catch
wanted
that?
to leave
Yeah,
the
that part, I was like, what is going on?
I do like the idea that he was actually gay the whole time and was just deeply closeted and like had to come
And
to
then
terms with it
finally
at
it's
the
like,
end.
okay. I was like, is this, or is this not, or are we just gonna say it is and go for it?
There's
Yep.
like a 5-minute conversation at the end of the movie that's just him like, "I'm so sorry, man. I've been in love with you this whole time,
So
and I
cute.
haven't been able to process it." And like he just
And I
has a
just
whole
needed my entire life to be at risk and the future of everything to realize.
yeah.
I mean, it would track, right? Like, that is how
Mhm.
people are so frequently taught to, especially men, are so frequently taught to deal with emotions and attraction, is like to be mean. And especially if you don't understand your
Violence.
own emotions and attractions, engage in violence.
Yeah.
So, it tracks. Yeah.
Emily, you mentioned Christie. He's another guy who
Yeah.
shouldn't be in this film. He should be in another film like The Matrix, because that man
Right.
is an action is a sci-fi action movie like superhero. He is able to ricochet bullets off of
Right?
plates in the
That was
ceiling.
so cool.
I agree. It is also completely out of place in any alien film. This man is a
Right.
superhero. He should be in The Matrix or Total Recall or some. Honestly, he's even more heightened
Hmm.
in terms of his abilities, I would say, than some of the characters in Total Recall. This dude's a
I mean,
one. He's a wrecking crew. He's like
yeah.
Equilibrium, gun fu over here.
He could be like his own born identity, kind of
Yeah.
like he and Call could team up,
Hmm.
take everybody down. Is that
I
what the next
completely
Yeah.
agree.
Alien movie is? Except for he died.
It should be a Predator movie. That's what I would say. Put him in a Predator movie. I feel like he fits
Yeah,
better.
there we go.
Ooh,
Yeah.
yeah.
This
And he's
team
the
should have
actor.
been this should have been a Predator movie where all of the maybe get rid of Ripley, leave Ripley and the alien, but
Yeah.
have the main team fighting a Predator. And I feel like the whole movie suddenly comes together. At least for me, I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
tone makes
Mm,
sense, the characters fit. All right, let's do this.
yeah. Yeah. That tracks. Huh. I never thought about it that way. We haven't gotten to the Alien versus Predator, obviously. So I don't know what that entails. I'm curious as we get closer and closer, and as I've watched all the Predators for our
Yep.
movie commentaries. We did a big like watch in August, but
Yep.
the alien.
Literally, the next two
Hmm.
movies we'll be watching are the two Alien versus Predator movies, for better or worse.
Oh, well, look at that!
So,
Perfect timing. Right when I'm like, now I'm really curious what that looks like. Okay, cool, cool. Yeah, yeah. That does make a lot more sense to have them be predator characters in a Predator movie.
Hmm. I think yeah, aside from like the tonal issues, I also want to highlight pace. You pointed out that the dramatic scenes really don't work very well at all, and I think I've seen look, I haven't seen Buffy, so I cannot speak to the dramatic scenes in Buffy, but I do think that the dramatic scenes in say the Avengers or even Dr. Horrible Sing Along blog, they land. Like I felt
yeah,
things watching them.
yeah.
And so I
Hmm.
wonder if Joss Whedon's style works when he executes it, but when other people do it, it just feels weird. Because those movies
Mm.
also
That's fair.
have dark,
Yeah, because they have
scary. Go ahead, yeah.
comedy and drama, and yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
Fair,
Maybe
fair.
he's not as good at writing it as he is at directing it.
Could be. I also just feel like some of the scenes are confusing. Like watching the scene
Yes,
between Ripley and Call. I'm not like at first it's like okay, so Call's come here to like kill Ripley and then but by the end like Ripley's like cradling Call's face and I was like this
it's very
okay.
sapphic. They're flirting.
Yeah, it's what is that trope? Fighters to lovers or enemies to lovers or
It's
whatever the
thirsty
Philly
sword
happens on.
lesbians.
Yeah.
This whole movie, it's just somebody got a hold of thirsty sword lesbians early and played it through, and this is what happened.
Honestly, I wish there'd been more of that and we'd gotten more development because it feels like
I mean, yeah.
it hit when it first started happening. I was like, "Oh, really? Like, well, okay, this seems like a switch." Because she was about to kill you a second ago, and also Call
Yep.
seemed confused. I think that was what threw me. It didn't seem like Call was like, "Oh, wow, she's so hot." Call seemed like, "What? Like, why? What are you doing?"
Okay, but that is very sapphic, right? Like it is. Wait, what? What? I can't be attractive. I can't be desirable to you.
And
I
I'm an
don't like
android. Am I even
does
supposed to
not
have these
compute.
feelings? It's
Does
like,
not compute. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It totally tracks.
literally does not compute.
Yeah, yeah.
My programming cannot work for this.
If somebody has out there knows of a fan fiction that is just about Ripley and Call, like developing like a romance over the and like surviving this movie, and like them Ripley coming to terms with like herself as a clone and also an alien, and then Call being like, I'm an android but I have these feelings and stuff. I don't know, I'd read that. That honestly sounds like a more
Right.
interesting story than what we got.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
I
think
didn't say this in. Oh, go ahead, please.
no, oh no, it's all you.
Okay, I was gonna say I didn't say this in behind the scenes, but Joss Whedon had written a sequel that never got produced, and that was based. And so I feel like this film is kind of setting us up for a sequel. They return to
Mhm.
Earth, and so in his mind, the aliens would invade Earth, and Ripley, now with her superpowers, would be like the superpower defender of Earth kind of thing.
Mm.
So that's kind of what I
Mm.
feel like this film is leading up to, and then it never happens because they decide to go Alien versus Predator route.
That tracks.
And also,
Because there's
yeah,
no way the ship crash landing would cause that explosion.
yep. But also, like Sigourney Weaver has said many times, while she is open to the idea of returning to the franchise if a good script came along, which so far
It's
not
not
happened.
happening.
Yeah.
But she said that she really does not like the idea of Ellen Ripley fighting aliens on Earth. She thinks that's too tired and
Mm,
of an alien Earth invasion kind of movie trope.
yeah.
She just doesn't want to do. So,
Yeah.
kind of agree though on that.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
seems like then it's getting into the I mean it's already a like significant franchise, but that feels like getting into a never-ending franchise because there's no way that you can completely like part of how they've been able to win against the aliens is because space does half the job for you.
Yeah.
Like just get them into the space and then suck it out through the hole in the glass. You know.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or keeping them contained, because that was like a major
Mm-hmm.
fear of the first 3 movies, really, was we can't let them get a hold of it, because what happens when they start using it against people? They use it on Earth.
Yeah.
It's kind of like The Thing, the premise of The Thing as well, where it's like we
Yeah.
can't let this thing get back to human society, or else it's all
Mm-hmm.
over. And so I feel
Yeah.
like the idea of it does kind of shift it, where if it's already in human society, it almost feels like we've moved to a Predator movie mixed with like a Terminator movie
Yeah.
at that point, where
I
it's
was gonna
like,
say
Yeah.
it feels predatory to
yeah,
me to be
yeah,
like, there are these creatures from another planet on our planet and they can kill us. That's the premise of
Yeah.
Predator, yeah. Yeah.
I will say one scene that actually did work for me. In fact, the one scene that I came away from being like, oh yeah, that was cool, was the scene where they found the Ripley clones. Uh,
Yeah.
that felt like from an Alien movie. That was like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, this is disturbing. This is genuinely horrific and
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
disturbing. Yeah. And like
Yeah.
seeing how each one had like gone horribly wrong, and then finally the one
Yeah.
who was still there was just like, kill me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Which like is very Ripley. Like, please kill me.
mm-hmm.
This is
Right.
not gonna end well. But like also I said this to Pace after we watched, but like I if you're going to kill somebody, it makes a lot more sense to me to kill them and then burn everything than to kill them by burning them. Like she gets
Yeah.
set like that bed lights up like it's full of very flammable things on purpose. But I do not want to burn to death. No, thank you. Like we know that that is a political statement. That is not what this was. This was not a
Yeah.
political statement.
Although I literally said today while we were watching Apollo 13 that if I ever die by capital punishment, I hope that they'll put me under a rocket going into space. That's how I want to go out. So I'm down for
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you, Emily. I think Ripley should have gone for a quick, like, grabbed one of their
Right.
guns, shot
Right, like
the clone, yeah,
shoot
and
the clone
then
and then go ahead and light everything up. But yeah.
the poor clone, like, not like that.
I
Right.
didn't mean it. Yeah.
Yeah,
I did
that's not what I meant.
I do think though that was I agree with you that that was one of the better scenes. And there's the thing that tracks, right, is, and I think it's because it feels like it was in two different movies, but it's because we watched Alien 3 basically two different times. But the like kill me and the like the thing that sticks with Ripley even in the cloning is an understanding of sometimes it is better to die in a self-sacrifice way, right? Like sometimes it is better to die than to continue or to risk the entire population of all of humanity from this alien. And
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe the clone was never going to like have a full alien happen, but they were trying to do something with it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But that also gets to like Ripley's memories somehow passing down. She knows everything that happened by the end of this movie. She clearly can recollect everything that has happened to her at this point.
Yeah.
How? And they
I
say
don't.
her memories are passed down genetically because
That's like
that's how
trauma.
Yeah.
that
It does
works.
get passed down intergenerationally, like intergenerational trauma, and it does get woven into your genetics and your DNA. But that is not the same thing as memory
Right?
at all.
Coincidentally,
Yeah.
the same thing happens in the Clone Saga in Spider-Man. The Clone Saga is every clone that gets made has all the memories of the person that it was cloned from. So I don't know
Oh.
if that was just a big thing in the 90s, except
I
for
feel like
Gattaca. Uh,
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I feel
yeah.
like that was a big thing of like clones retain memory.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
when did they
Because that's how
clone
you don't
the
know who's the clone and who's the real one.
sheep or whatever in the 90s? So I feel like there's a lot of like sci-fi reactionary stuff to that, probably.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have to look
I
it up.
I also the I think despite the fact that I don't like how the movie is lit, like a lot of the movie I think is far too bright for
Mm.
this
Mhm.
for an
Hmm.
alien movie. I think you need if they're going to be bright, it needs to be like stark. Like it needs to be like in Aliens where it's
Mm.
like really bright uncomfortable fluorescent lights that are kind of like
Yeah.
ugh, or like shadowy and murky and dingy and creepy.
Mhm.
Very little of the movie feels that way, but despite
Mhm.
all of that, I do think the overall like design and look and feel of the movie works. Like from a visual perspective, it feels kind of
Yeah.
grimy and grainy, a lot of it, and there's multiple moments that are like kind of gross. I
Mhm.
when it finally gets into them like trying to travel through the ship, a lot of that I think does look good, and I think the practical
Mhm.
effects are really really good. The CGI is bad, but those practical effects are really good.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah.
And I love
Dolly, real quick,
that.
Dolly the sheep was cloned in July of 1996. So about a
Okay.
year and a half before this came out. So,
That would
yeah,
make Yeah, that would
that
make
tracks.
sense. Also, why Spider-Man was obsessed with cloning too, I'm sure.
Yep.
What were you going to say, Pace?
I don't remember.
Moving through the ship. Bad CGI, good
Oh, it was
practical
about the
effects.
CGI and practical effects. I agree with you, Jeremy. I love the practical effects here. They look so good. And then the CGI is so bad. Like it
Yeah.
is such a big difference between the two.
This is like during the era that I think was kind of the peak of practical effects in a lot of ways. Like the 90s, the
Yep.
mid to late 90s especially, the way that they were and even into the early 2000s, the effects during that period are like, oh, like I guess even starting as far back as Jurassic Park, things just the effects in that decade are real, especially the practical effects, really really
Yeah.
incredible. And I think this
Mm-hmm.
absolutely benefits from that.
Hmm.
But the CGI is like to the point where I'm like, I wish you'd used models like miniatures. We should have just done
Yeah.
miniatures
Mm.
because this takes me out of the movie as soon as I see it.
Hmm.
The aliens in the water reminded me of something, but I don't know what.
I do like seeing them swim around. That like bad CGI, really bad. But like it is cool to see them like in a different environment than we've seen them thus
Mm-hmm.
far. So that's
They're
kind of a
like
cool piece.
mermaids. I think they remind me of mermaids. Or
Yeah.
maybe Ursula.
I want to see now. Speaking of
Little
like
mermaid
Guillermo
style.
del Toro, because we brought him up a few times, I want to see The Shape of Water, except with the xenomorph instead.
Hmm.
And with the scene where her friend asks her like, so does he have a, and she does like
Yep.
the weird opening thing that
Yep.
works with it. We have the alien human hybrid, we have a model.
Right? Yep. It's really bright red and inflamed looking, but it's there.
I I would have liked for the, I don't actually, I like the idea of them swimming because they even swim in Aliens. We just don't really see it. We just know they're moving through the
Yeah.
water. I just
Mhm.
wish that it's too brightly lit, first of all. I think
Mhm.
even
Hmm.
then we have far too clear a view of them swimming and it ends up looking a little
Mhm.
goofy. I want it to feel like
Yeah, they like
sharks.
should have. Oh
You
yeah.
know what I mean? I want it to feel like when they're swimming up, I want it to be like, oh no. Like the same way when you see
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
shark coming in, that's what I want. That's the feeling that I want.
Yeah. Yeah, because it was not like that at all. Like based on how they were swimming, they should have caught up way faster than they did. Their bodies
Mhm.
literally like turned into jellyfish and were just like flowing with the current, like no resistance. And it took so long for them to catch up. And it was so bright. And but if you think about it as they were, so this is, okay, this I think is an interesting thing to talk about, the way that the aliens adapt, because they've been adapting for as long as we have been watching movies about them. um so a couple months now. But there's one part where it feels like they have adapted some to the dog, which is the theatrical release version, not
Of Alien
the
3.
of Alien 3, not the assembly release version, which is of an ox. But the like nuzzling up, and I was like, this is a dog. Somehow you got those genes. Okay. Um, but then they're starting to also develop, like, Predator is very mental and like strategic and all of that stuff. Alien has strategy, but it also feels like it's very much instinct. It's just like do the thing, do the thing, do the thing. And this is where it starts to get more thought processed for it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like it kill like one of the aliens sacrifices the other. I mean, I think they're kind of like fighting, so neither really wants to be sacrificed. But the one sacrifices the other to burn a hole through the floor so that they can escape. They learn when the guy presses the button that what it means for them, and so they learn it immediately and stop doing that. Um, and so that's, I think, part of what's both interesting and takes it
Yeah.
away a little bit from Alien and more into Predator,
Well,
because they're
and I
starting to
think,
think and you can see the thought process and the reasoning and like trapping them, right? So the water, if they're swimming in the water, it might not actually be to catch anybody, but instead to get them to the place of the hatching so that they all become the hatchy
yeah,
things.
yeah. And so, like within the lore of the stuff, within the lore of the film universe, the fact that xenomorphs are highly adaptive to the bodies they gestate in, and then add to the fact that the human DNA is now somehow mixed in with the queen alien who
Mm-hmm.
produced these aliens and stuff, it's clear that they have also gained some of the intelligence from the human DNA that they did not have in the other movies. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a new adaptation they've gotten, it seems.
Yeah, and that's one of the points I think where the movie doesn't work. They should have had even just like a very vague sci-fi explanation. It feels like they kind of hand wave it and leave it for the audience to try and fill in the blanks, but it's the basic premise of the film. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think it would be nice for them to say, for the scientists at some point to say, yes, we initially were trying to just clone Ripley, but as it turns out, the xenomorphs, like when a person has been impregnated, the xenomorphs actually somehow mix their DNA in with the other
Mm-hmm.
person. And so when you can, and then like if somebody, maybe when they have the aliens in captivity, they're like, whoa, they're acting way more intelligently than all of our records would indicate.
Mm-hmm.
Why, even like a single two
Yeah,
lines of dialogue that are like, wow, clearly they have also taken traits for, that's it. Like that's all we need, and then I go, oh,
Yeah.
okay. Like, but they don't have anything like that. And look, it doesn't need to hold together under intense scientific scrutiny. Just something that seems to make sense within the
Yeah.
realm of the, yeah.
yeah.
In universe, it just has to have some consistency.
That's also something though that Emily and I noticed about this movie is out of the 4 Alien films that of the original quadrilogy, this is the least. This film seems to care the least about scientific accuracy compared to the
Mm-hmm.
rest. All the
Mhm.
other ones, while they make some stuff to make the plot work and stuff, and some of it's like fictionalized and stuff, they all at least attempt to like ground it scientifically. Whereas this one, it just all that seems out the window.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I completely
Yeah.
agree. I just even tonally, like aside from the tone, but like
Mhm.
the plot of the other movies are always have a sense of we need to stop this thing from getting
Mm-hmm.
someplace. There's always, like you mentioned, Emily, an element of like self-sacrifice. It's like
Mm-hmm.
we need to escape, but we can't let this thing get out. This seemed pretty much just run away from the aliens. There was much
Mm-hmm.
less a sense of we can't let this thing get down to earth. We can't, like, if it takes us crashing this ship, we have to ensure that wherever the alien is destroyed. If we have to go,
Mm-hmm.
this thing can't. It's like that's okay as long as this thing doesn't make it out. That was what I
Yeah.
think I was missing as well, because that's a big
Yeah.
Mhm.
And there's
self-sacrifice. Go ahead. Yeah.
I was just gonna say there's like one-liners for that. There's one-liners for their intellectual development, right? When he's like, quick learner. And there's a one-liner from I think Ripley of if you can't blow it up, then you have to crash it. Like that it has to, but it is like it's just such a like one line toss out that's not everybody else is like, no, I am going to live.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh,
Yep.
that's not, yeah.
Yeah, the character work is bad because, like, it's one thing to have a one-liner, but we don't see people reckon with that.
Mm-hmm.
We don't see the
Yeah.
point where they're like, well, but I've been a mercenary who's just been in it for myself this whole time. Even the
Mm-hmm.
fact that they discover that the cargo they were bringing on board was actually people who were being, I think that's what was happening. They were bringing on prisoners that ended up being implanted with face huggers, and they didn't realize that that was what was going to be happening. Right? That's
Yeah.
kind of the they
Well,
don't.
they
They
stole the
captured it.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's clear that there seems to be some sort of black market of when people
Human
are
trafficking.
in of human trafficking, of where people are asleep in cryotubes going to their mining operations or whatever, and then the mercenaries just come and kidnap them while they are asleep in the cryotubes. And so that's what seems to be happening is they purposefully kidnap them while they were on their journey to somewhere and brought them to the military, but they didn't know, like you're saying, Jeremy, that it was going to be for experiments of face hugging aliens and all that. But
Yeah.
they did very intentionally like know that that was their cargo and what they um and
Mm-hmm.
giving it to the military, that's not going to be for anything good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's going to be bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's another, you mentioned the military. That's another thing to highlight that's a difference with this movie, that the flagrantly in every previous iteration it's always been corporations that are
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
evil. There's like a cyberpunk element of these evil corporations that have dominated and
Mm-hmm.
destroyed the planet and are exploiting their workers, and they have militaries. That's how powerful they've gotten, but they are not the military. Now Wayland Yutani was bought out by Walmart. But the word Walmart, first of all, should never be in an alien film. That's
Right.
what are we doing here? But secondly, okay, Walmart destroyed Wayland Yutani, but Walmart is not the new villain, thank goodness. Although that would have also been hilarious. But it's
Right.
now
Right.
just the military. The military of who? America?
Yeah. Right.
Right.
That's also not clear. Like, there's so much just not clear in this movie.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do we want to talk about gender in the Alien franchise and gender
Yes.
and sexuality? Because that's
Yeah.
something that's like a big theme. Like in the first
Mm-hmm.
one, it's like the undercurrents of sexual assault imagery in terms of how the alien produces all the phallic imagery, even the scene
Mm-hmm.
where Ash is attacking Ripley by taking a porn magazine and shoving it in her mouth. Then when she knocks his head off,
Mm.
he's spewing up all this white goop as if like he has an
Yep.
overabundance of macho behavior. The idea of mother.
Mm-hmm.
Then of course in the second one we have all the mother themes, macho
Yeah.
versus all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
This one, we do kind of have that, but I feel like the movie doesn't reckon with it in any sort of interesting or
Yeah,
intelligent
it's
way.
just
Yeah.
well, it's written by Joss Whedon, right? This
Mm.
is my theory. It's written by Joss Whedon. He knows that it's been there in the past, so it's going to be there again. It does not occur to him that it's not a good thing and it needs to be reckoned with and addressed,
Mhm.
because then he might address his own.
Yeah.
It's my
And
theory.
like, and I think that's also clear in the fact that every other movie, this hyper masculinity people die, and it is only
Mm-hmm.
through Ripley that there's any sort of salvation that happens. And in
Mm-hmm.
this one, it's like the none of the hyper masculine people really die. Is they make it to the end. It's all the scientists and all the other
Yeah.
goons and stuff who die.
Christie should have
Yeah.
made it. Christie is like the closest. Christie and
Yeah.
the group leader are the closest equivalents we have to like the Michael Bean character
Yeah.
in
Yep.
Aliens, and they both go down. And
Mhm.
Yeah.
then what's his face? Ron Perlman. How? Oh my god.
I,
Right.
Yeah.
I don't. And it's the like kind of survival with the kiss of the guy that he wanted to just ditch, right? Like it's the kind of survival that is, I am not going to address any of the harm I caused or any of that, but we survived this, so now we're buddies without addressing my misogyny and my
Mhm.
ableism and my assholery. Like, yeah, it
Yep.
feels very Joss Whedon. The more we talk about it, the more I like actually know that it's a Joss Whedon film, the more I'm just like, no, this tracks, because Joss Whedon was very much about depicting things without challenging.
Yeah. And like
Yeah.
the brand of feminism that was popularized through Buffy is definitely happening here too. This notion of
Mm-hmm.
like a very skinny, almost waif-like woman who is somehow
Mm-hmm.
super strong. Like those
Mm-hmm.
two things are incongruous. And yet that's like what we get in Buffy. That's what we get in Dollhouse. That's what we get in Firefly with
Mm-hmm.
Summer Glau. And it's like it's just always this super skinny woman who's like this idolized male fantasy who somehow also has these superpowers, yet is still able to be completely waif-like and have no muscles or
Hmm.
anything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's well, and then right, they also they the way that she is depicted when she's still in the gel stuff, and they're like covering up the naughty bits, right? And it's just like there are so many different ways to do that, but like keeping someone naked, completely naked, and yet somehow still modest, but just like out in the open is not like I
Yeah.
is not okay, is a huge violation, right? Like the
Hmm.
ways that we're depicting violation is happening now, maybe even more from the men and the humans than from the alien, because now the
Yeah.
alien can also just reproduce itself.
But
um
also, yeah.
yeah.
And also like into the meta text of the film itself, whereas the first three Alien films I think were very much against sexualizing Ripley. At the very
Hmm.
end of the first Alien we get a brief glimpse of her in her underwear, but it's very brief and it doesn't even like linger on like the sexy parts. It's just like a quick pan up as she is changing into her
Yeah.
sleepwear,
It's more of a
and then we
vulnerability
never
thing.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, and then we but then this one is like we see her fully naked, we see her
Hmm.
breast, we see well, the clone breast of her and stuff like that. We see even her vagina, one of the or the top of her vulva in the one cryo tube where she's like
Hmm.
cloned, and like, and she's a child in that one too, or adolescent, before they age her up into the adult. We
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
the adolescent's vulva and stuff like that, and it's just like so gross and like
Hmm.
very much like this violating gaze in the meta text of the film, not just in the plot of the
Hmm.
film too.
There's
Yeah.
I bring this up because it came out exactly the same year. There's some strong parallels between this and The Fifth Element in that regard.
Yeah.
Because the Fifth Element, the whole introduction of Lilu, is it Lilo? Lilu?
Lily?
I can never remember her name. Mila
Lilu, yep.
Jovovich's character. Yeah, it's literally like she's reconstituted and it's a bunch of dudes ogling her in a glass case. Like she's on
Yep.
display unconscious and it's a bunch of
Ooh.
dudes like, whoa. It's the same
Yep.
kind of vibe.
Yeah.
I think I agree with you, Emily. If they were gonna do like, oh, she's naked in a test tube, she should have been in the fetal position. First of all, it should have been
Mhm.
like
Mm-hmm.
she's floating in a test tube and just kind of grows and it just keeps
Mm-hmm.
growing into a large human. I think that
Mm-hmm.
would have been fine. But it's interesting. Both of those movies were directed by French men. Both of them came out the
Right.
same year. I wonder if some of it is a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of a cultural thing where it's like there are more permissive attitudes towards sexuality and sexualization, but it does come across as very male gazy and
Mm-hmm.
very objectifying, and especially when you consider like, yeah, she's literally on display in a room of people. There's very little that's empowering about it. And also
Yeah.
the gender aspect of it, where she's depicted as hairless, like she's completely
Yeah.
hairless, and then when she's a woman, she's got a full head of hair. Like when they finally bring her out, it's like,
Uh-huh.
oh, now
Mhm.
she's got a full head of hair. She's now like viewed as more, I think,
That the
feminine.
hair is the hair is the marker of full grown.
Yeah,
No
Yep.
hair, no hair, no
Only
hair, and then immediately
only
hair,
hair
fully
on
grown.
her head though. No body hair, which
very
Oh yeah.
true.
also no armpit hair, no vulva hair, nothing. It's just like head, that's it.
Yeah.
That's the only place where hair grows naturally in women, apparently.
Ugh. Yeah.
We're already in our deep dive, I feel like, so we'll
Yeah.
just keep
Oh
going.
yeah.
Yeah,
Also, the like dynamic with the scientists who one of them is like she this, she that, and the other is like it, it, and just the
Mhm.
dehumanization, right? They've already like violated her and dehumanized her in just cloning her without consent, without permission, any of that, and just experimenting on her. And then and I mean, I referred to clone number 7 as it at one point in this
Mhm.
podcast episode, right? And maybe I shouldn't have, and maybe I don't know. Probably if I were to go back, I would use they. But to then have just such an insistence that she is not fully human, that she is
Yeah,
not worthy of consideration as a human being. And so they can just lock her up. They can do whatever they want with her. They can teach her what they want to teach her and then just abandon her and isolate her the rest of the time.
a
And they don't have any accountability or ethics around that.
and that's also paralleled in Call too, the way they treat her when they find out she is
Mm-hmm.
not human. She
Mm-hmm.
suddenly is no longer worthy of any humanity and being treated humanely. Not that Ron
Yeah.
Perlman was treating any women like they were humans, but like
Mm-hmm.
even worse and escalating it. And then the
Mm-hmm.
only two women to survive the film are both not true women in a sense, but both one's a clone and one's an android, and what that also seems to suggest.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now there's an interesting movie there,
Hmm.
theoretically, like a really interesting movie about a cloned alien woman, like part alien, part woman, who is treated like and abused and objectified by her captors, and then ends up, but she's actually far more powerful and has much more
Mm-hmm.
like perspective on things, and ends up teaming up with an
Yeah,
android, and they unleash the aliens as like she has a connection to the aliens and realizes that even though they
Mm-hmm.
are predatory, like
so
I don't know, there's a whole interesting movie that didn't get
there,
made.
in fact, there's
It
a
could
whole
have.
franchise there, and it's called Resident Evil.
Oh yes.
It's essentially Mila
Mm.
Jovovich's character Alice in that she's a clone
Oh.
who's super power. Spoilers, Emily, since you haven't seen it. But like
Yeah.
when we do our Resident Evil franchise, she's a clone who has a connection to the zombies and all that. Anyway,
Mm.
Hmm.
But I'd
but
watch that. Like I would watch the version
yeah,
of this
yeah,
movie that
Yeah.
was really zeroed in. And this is, I think, one of the biggest criticisms is the characters. We even though the characters are broadly drawn, we rarely get a look into their actual experiences. As interesting as it is for an actor to be like, oh, I'm a human, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
also part xenomorph. I'm also the thing that
Yeah.
killed me. And I'm part of the, like, I have a connection to this monster, and I've also been created and being treated.
Mm-hmm.
This is an interesting movie premise.
Yeah.
uh Something like Ex Machina, I think just a much better. And Ex Machina also has its own issues with misogyny, but I do
Yeah.
think that the perspective of the character of Alicia Vikander's character is much more
Yeah.
like she's a much more interesting person, and we see more of things from her perspective, and see more of like there's more highlighted like, oh, the way that these people are being treated is wrong. Like these people are being objectified and treated and manipulated by the men in their lives, and it's very clear that
Mm-hmm.
the movie calls it out and it's a theme. But like you're saying, Emily, it's not just that it's in the movie; it's that it's in the movie and there's nothing said about it. We never see
Mm-hmm.
how Ripley feels about that.
Mm-hmm.
We see very little of how Call feels about it when everybody
Yeah.
turns on her. The closest we get is like the little tender moment that she and Ripley share, which is again, I would say partly sapphic, but also I would say kind of religious. Because this is one of the things I wrote down is for the religious
Mm-hmm.
themes. Ripley
Yeah.
Yeah.
dies in the previous movie in cruciform and is resurrected in this film,
Hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
she now is basically like post crucifixion Jesus, where it's just
Yeah.
superpowers out the wazoo. Jesus is showing up wherever he wants to. Like he's
Yep.
just like, oh, okay, he's ascended. She has
Yeah.
ascended
Yep.
to a
Yeah.
higher plane, a higher form of humanity.
Yeah. Her blood is
Yep.
magic.
Exactly, her blood is magic. There she allows Call to penetrate her with the knife through the hand, which is
Mm-hmm.
partly, you could say, a sexual thing, but also stigmata. It's like the sign, the
Hmm.
Right, and
wounding.
it's a Thomas. It's a like
Yeah, and
see touch. Yeah.
exactly. And when Call gets shot and falls down and then reappears, she's like, "But I saw you die," and places her hand in Call's wound. And then
Yeah.
we
Mm-hmm.
we later see a moment where she puts some of Call's, I guess, guts and wires back
Yeah.
into the wound. It's like a
The
Yeah.
tender
nerve
thing.
system.
We should have had
Mm-hmm.
more of that. Like that was some of the cool stuff in the
Mm-hmm.
movie. Uh,
And that
Yeah.
and that adds to the sapphiness too. I want to just call it that piece too of like the fact it is kind of in film that is intended. I'm trying to remember the book. I'll link in the show notes. But I think we talked about this in. Trying to remember what episode we talked about this in. We talked about it in one of our past seasons. The ways in which film shows sex without actually showing sex, like
Mm.
it telegraphs sex to the audience without actually like depicting it for whatever reason, censor reasons or whatever. And so the fact that that scene, that tender scene when Ripley and Call have Ripley fingering Call essentially, complete with the milky white substance that is coming out, and the way she puts her fingers into the hole, it just is
Mm-hmm.
very, very sexual, and I feel
Yeah.
like that is very, very intentional.
yeah.
And it's so tender.
Yeah, yeah.
It is really so tender. And I think I really like what you said, Jeremy. Like I had not thought of it in all of those ways, right? Like Ripley is, of course, the Messiah character. And also Call becomes kind of a Messiah character. And there's just this intimacy. And I think about, the moment in scripture when they're taking Jesus' body, right? Where the women are the ones who show up at the foot of the cross. And sometimes the beloved disciple, whose gender we do not technically know, but we make a lot of assumptions about. And then like to take Jesus' body off of the cross and to bring him to the tomb. And there's this intimacy that is so obvious when thinking about it in this context, right? Like of the two of them when Call comes back, and that intimacy of you were dead and here you are with me. And I think, I don't know that they would, but I think about, as you were talking about like what alien resurrection movie we would want to watch, it reminded me of the remakes that have been happening. Like, I mean, if you go all the way back to like Wicked,
Hmm.
right, is a great example of this, where it's what perspective are we telling the story from. But even like Candyman and some of the other movies that have been remade more recently with any sort of like cultural awareness, right, of what it means to be in Chicago in that time period for Candyman, but just like the awareness of whose perspective we're watching things from. And with the Alien franchise, where it has always been this male gaze, to then go back, especially to this movie, and say, what does this look like for Ripley? What is this movie told from Ripley's perspective, or even from Cobb's? You could do it so many, and this is where we get like from a certain point of view or novelizations and stuff. But
Well, we have the novelization here written by A.C. Crispin, a woman. I'm very curious to go now and read the novelization of this movie and see if it addresses some of these issues.
Yeah.
Because it very well might.
Yeah. I would absolutely like I completely agree. I think again the first two movies do a good job of at least the second movie also hones in way more on Ripley's perspective, I think. But this one needed that. Like it needed a clear it doesn't really have a clear protagonist in terms of whose perspective we're seeing things from. We have very little information about how Ripley feels about anything. Like even in the scenes where she's like, they're going to kill you all. How does she feel about that?
That is because she is, quote unquote, emotionally autistic, which is complete and utter bullshit.
Yeah,
For the record, people, in case you didn't
It's someone
know.
with actual autism. Totally
Right,
agree.
like
I totally agree with what you're saying, Emily.
that was so cringy. like that's a very 90s. I feel like a very 90s idea because that's like within a few. When did Rain Man come out? Was that like 89, 88, 89?
Yeah, around there.
Yeah, so yeah, not good. not good or accurate.
So bad.
But like legitimately, what I think I put in the notes I would have loved to see this movie with Winona Ryder's character as the protagonist. And if we see it through her eyes and see it, and it focuses primarily on the relationship between her and Ripley in the context of a really macho society, two people, like I don't know, you could also there's a lot you can bring out of that. There's a lot you can bring out.
That would be so amazing. Like you start with like just random data downloading. That's how you start the movie. Random data downloading. That's all you get, and then
yeah.
And
like her going to kill Ripley, but also being like fascinated by her because it's like, wow, she's incredible, but also like I have to destroy her. And then like then Ripley's like, what are you like? Are you gonna do it? And she's like, oh no, I can't. And we see their relationship grow, and at that point the aliens escaping almost like there's a couple of ways you could do it. It could be like the women are unleashing those upon the men to destroy the oppressive masculine system that is sort of delegitimizing them both as humans and as women. Or
that would be such a movie to watch.
Or you could just say that they represent that force, and that Ripley happens to be. It ends up becoming a lot more of a trans narrative, I think, at that point, where it's like, I identify, like, I have DNA in me that allows me to identify with this perspective, even though I'm not actually that thing. And so I recognize that this is a threat, and we need to get, and like, it will also destroy itself. Like this masculine, overpowering, like a sexually assaulting force will ultimately destroy itself. And we have to get out of here and escape from, like, to me that is just a way more, that's like a cool that's a movie that makes me get excited to like watch an alien movie. I'm like, oh, this sounds sick. Okay, strap it on the bib, just like, feed me this movie. This sounds great.
And that line Ripley says to Call about Call being, she should have known that Call was an android because Call was too humane to be human. Like that is a gem of a line in here. And if that was what was uncovered, like part of the theme here, and that was more like central to the narrative and thematic nature of the movie, I think it would have been much better too.
Well, and it would
just
work.
A throwaway line,
and it would work so well also with the evolution of the alien, right? That the alien is becoming more reasoning, that is like caressing Ripley, that there is this, I mean, it's still like, you still have it be evil, whatever, blah blah blah, but like the what if the alien had some of that humaneness that also came into play?
Through Ripley's influence, they've become
right, because like we've talked about this on the podcast, that the aliens essentially are just wired to survive, and that's what they're doing. They're not malicious, they're just wired to survive. And so
they're apex predators. And what does it mean to be no longer at the top of the food chain?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
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 Uh, the last thing I have
Movie.
for this, I'm sure you both have a lot more too, but the last thing I have is we talked a little bit about it so far, but just how much motherhood continues to show up in this
Mm-hmm.
film. And now we have a queen mother, alien mother, who rejects the child. The child then instead bonds with Ripley, and Ripley becomes the mother. So
I thought
Ripley
the
gave,
child rejected the mother.
Yeah, the child rejected the mother. The mother
oh,
seemed
right,
happy to see
yes.
the child. The mother was like,
Yeah, and
"Oh,
then the child was
baby."
like, boom.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
For reasons that are
And so,
unknown.
like,
Yeah.
yeah,
I didn't
yeah.
get that at all.
Why would you explain it?
But like some of Ripley's lines in there about like actually being the mother of this alien and stuff like that, and
Mm-hmm.
kind of the I do love that scene. And I think it's just because Sigourney Weaver is such a great actor that she can take the trash and turn it into something beautiful. Of that scene when she like ultimately decides I'm going to kill my child and throws her blood onto the thing and stuff. And you can
Mm-hmm.
see the heartbreak on her face. Like she does have an attachment to this creature, even
Mm-hmm.
though the creature is this awful, destructive force that's trying to kill everybody and things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, as Pace pointed out, acid does not eat through glass.
Yes.
Mm.
That's why we put acid in glass beakers in science class because it does not eat through glass. And yet
Oh.
somehow it does in this movie. So
Right?
cool.
And there's all of this metal all around that
Right.
she could fling it to, but you don't get the like image. And
Mhm.
also the like alien being sucked out through that hole, and then it just like pulls on its skin and pulls on its skin and then just sucks all of its innards out.
Yeah.
Whoa.
That was gnarly.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think that the themes of motherhood, again, it feels like they start to be like they're nodded to, they're acknowledged, but they're not developed
Mm-hmm.
much. I think that's another
Yeah.
thing where
Mhm.
it's like the feelings that Ripley has towards this child.
Mm-hmm.
If she's aware of the alien's movements, I feel like there should have been more of a she's aware of like the idea that she has a child gestating somewhere
Mm-hmm.
and she can feel the child growing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Even the idea that the alien queen has evolved to give birth now, give live birth instead of laying
Yeah, through a
eggs.
womb instead of eggs. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
there's so much like interesting stuff there that I feel like we just don't
Mm-hmm.
get into really at all. And also, I hate the design of the alien hybrid. That it just looks weird.
It's
It looks
awful.
really bad.
Yeah,
It looks more like a predator
Mm.
yeah, or
than it starts to look more like a predator
yeah.
because it doesn't have the like popping out
It's got like a goofy
Yeah.
little
punch from the
nose
But
thing
nostril.
also
too.
Yeah, it's like
that
yeah.
also though gets into some of the unintended colorism. I think it's
Mm.
unintended. I don't know. But the colorism and racism of the film of the aliens being black, but when
And
they
then
become more human, they're
they
white.
get white
Yep.
and very
Interesting.
very white.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah.
yeah.
I think I would say it's probably unintentional, but it definitely does, like,
Hmm.
especially when you kill off all of your people of color characters. It kind of
Right.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know about this. Uh
It's one of those like I know that you didn't do that intentionally. That's also part of the problem. Right?
yeah.
Like that it reveals the stuff that's subconscious
Yeah.
too. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think the another thing to highlight is during that alien hybrid scene when
Hmm.
it we first of all, I before I say the thing I was going to say, we haven't mentioned Brad Dourif. We need to address Brad Dourif in this
Right.
movie.
Right.
Which one is he?
He's the weird scientist who tries to like kisses the glass and stuff, and then is
Yeah.
there just monologuing at the end. He's just like
Yeah.
tied up like, oh look, and it's just like, what is happening?
Wormtongue
Yeah.
from Lord of the Rings, as you would know him, Emily.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. He's what is happening with him? He's so weird in this movie.
He is, yeah. It's almost like he's hypnotized. Like he
Yeah.
just becomes entranced by
Like
yeah.
Reinfeld, like with Dracula. He's like, the master is coming. That's what it
Yeah.
feels like.
Yeah. And
Yes.
like So many of the characters in this feel like caricature, like very campy caricatures. This one, Brad Dourif, is very good at being a character actor that plays like really campy, off the wall characters. And so I feel like that's another tonal shift of this movie, is moving from like characters that we get some pathos to and agency to now they are just characters that are really weird and move the plot along, but they don't actually seem to have much motivation or reason behind them. They just seem to do whatever the plot needs to happen in order for the plot to happen.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I think
Yeah.
there's an interesting story arc there where, if say you focus in on Call and Ripley and their relationship to each
Mm-hmm.
other, have Brad Dourif be part of like the main scientist guy who is like the main one perpetrating
Mm-hmm.
that the scientific side of like the oppression and the objectification, and then you can also have like the military aspect in there as well, but like make him more of like the human villain of the film. I think that's, and then by the end when he gets
Mm-hmm.
taken away, you're like, oh good, he's dead, but then he shows up and it's like, oh, he's just gone mad and is now like obsessed with the aliens and has like a weird sexual fixation with all of
Mm-hmm.
it, because they would also like the
Yeah.
idea of him having a weird sexual fixation with everything to do with the aliens and also Ripley aligns with those themes of objectification
Yeah,
and
yeah.
masculine and macho control and stuff, like the
Mm-hmm.
chauvinistic misogyny and all that
Mm-hmm.
stuff, like all of that
Yeah.
he fits with that. But it's weird that he only shows up like at the beginning for a weird scene where he's just kissing he's making kissy faces at the alien queen and then spraying
Yeah.
her with like whatever freeze stuff they spray the aliens with.
I know. I was like, fire extinguisher.
That was what I
Right.
thought it was at first. Maybe they're hitting them with, they're
Yeah.
just pouring nitroglycerin on them, or
Oh
something.
gosh. Yeah.
Or not nitroglycerin.
I
What would it be? What is it that that freezes?
nitrous oxide. I don't know.
Is it nitrous oxide? I don't know. There, I remember
I have
there
no
was an
idea.
experiment where they put like they did
Liquid nitrogen.
liquid nitrogen. They're spray. They
Mm,
could be spraying them with liquid nitrogen, and that could be, maybe that's what
that
they're
would
doing. But yeah, it's
that would track. Also, the like this is jumping back a little bit, but also connected because I kind of feel like that scientist maybe also might feel a little bit like Mother, but probably doesn't think of himself that way. Right, but he has like been the one creating Ripley and the aliens and all of that stuff. Also, they changed the name of the computer.
mm-hmm.
The computer is now called Father and not Mother.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Why?
Right.
What is the commentary that we're making with this? Like in the original, her going to speak to Mother, you're going into like a womb like room.
Mm-hmm.
There's like
Mm-hmm.
there's thematic, like she represents safety and a help.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately,
And I mean,
go ahead.
no, you go.
She's unable to keep the kids completely safe when it finally gets when the Xenomorph finally gets unleashed, but that was her representation. What does Father
Mhm.
represent?
Nothing.
There was never an attempt to keep the kids safe.
Yeah.
It was never
Maybe you
about
could
keeping
say
the
like,
kids safe.
yeah, maybe if you could have Brad Dourif's character be the father figure, where he believes like, oh, I am the one who has brought about this insemination, and so then you see him as like this creepy, abusive father figure, an oppressive father figure, as opposed to, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like that could work. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but the other thing I was going to mention was,
Mm-hmm.
speaking of the aspect of the chest wound, that also I should mention, there's both Ripley and Call have chest wounds. That's another,
Mm-hmm.
like,
Yeah.
Call stops she stops her plan to stab Ripley when she sees the chest wound, and then
Mm-hmm.
Ripley later fingers Call's chest wound. There is a third fingering, or I guess a second fingering that occurs. I guess she kind of fingers it twice. So a third fingering that occurs, which is when the alien hybrid like shoves its fingers into Call's chest wound.
Mm.
That was
Yeah.
definitely getting back to the sexual assault roots of the story,
Mm-hmm.
in much the same
Yeah.
way. Like, it reminded me of the scene where the alien kills Veronica Cartwright's character, and you see its tail like slide in between her legs and like curve up. You never see what happens. You
Yep.
just see the motion of the tail is very suggestive in that moment, and it just cuts away and you hear her screaming. It reminded me of that. And again, that's something that it feels muddled because like, is it why? Like, why is it doing this? Why is it attacking her
Mhm.
that way? What is the idea here? Is it just what is wrong with this baby? Like, what? Why is the baby doing this?
Yeah. Yeah. And there's another one, which is not quite fingering, but when Ripley falls, dives, jumps, whatever's,
Yeah.
and then it just like envelops her
Mm-hmm.
and embraces her and brings her in to the womb,
Yeah.
to the place of birth and all of that stuff. And then she like finds her way out, and I don't understand quite how that
Yeah.
happened. But
That's honestly though my favorite scene in the movie. Like that's the only scene that really feels like thought out and well done and fits in line with the rest of the Alien franchise. Is that scene? I think
Where
personally.
she falls into the womb and like it's sort of
Yeah.
drawn in. Yeah.
Yeah.
mhm,
Isn't there also like a shot of what looks like, you're mentioning Emily, it looks like an alien like embracing her or cradling her for a moment? I noticed that seemed to happen as
mhm,
well, which was like, it was again weirdly tender. I was like, "Oh, this is a really interesting
mhm,
take on the material because it's like it's switching things around."
yeah.
Yeah.
And I like that. I like that there is that tenderness. I think it does do a really cool. I think it has the potential to do a really cool thing in the movie, and it falls short, right? But if we had, as you were saying, and as we've decided would be the best thing, if we had a movie from Ripley's perspective or from Call's perspective, whatever, of like what it's like to wake up as a clone, all of those things, but then to have like those intimate moments and those like moments of caress and kindness and nurture, and still you have to destroy it. Like there's just such good, like there is so much that you could pack into a movie like that.
Yeah,
I
especially
Yeah.
especially put in context with the earlier films where, especially in the case of Aliens, Ripley's whole arc is like, I lost my child and now I have a new
Yeah.
child that I want to protect. They what
Right.
she gets a third child now, and it's like, unfortunately this child has to be destroyed.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's, yeah, that it's, I lost this one child. This child I found to replace, but not replace because you can't replace children, but like another chance at being a mother. And now she's like, I am the monster's mother, and you have to kill it. You
Yeah.
have to kill your baby. Yeah.
That would have been, yeah, that version of the movie where you actually have like a genuine, because that would be a take on the material that really hasn't happened, focusing on not just like a romance but just a close tender relationship between say
Mm-hmm.
Ripley and Call, but also Ripley and the alien hybrid. Like all of those, you don't have that kind of tenderness in any of the other preceding films, and I don't think that it
Yeah.
would
Mm-hmm.
be out of place. I think if it's
Yeah.
done well and it's done in a sober sort of, like the few moments we get, it actually feels like, oh, okay, this is interesting. Like
Mm-hmm.
this kind of
Mm-hmm.
works. And I think if they had
Mm-hmm.
leaned more in that direction, it makes the horror aspect feel a lot worse, because now it's like we
Yeah.
care about this
Yeah.
relationship, we care about these people, and when that starts to come in, it's like, oh no. And when the scientists are
Mm-hmm.
mistreating them, and her and Call's own crew members are casting her out,
Mm-hmm.
that is also like, that hits way worse. Like it hits a lot
Then when it's
harder.
just like this motley crew, and yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically what I'm hearing is we need to be hired collectively, the three of us, to produce a film that
Yes.
is Alien Resurrection resurrected.
Yes. Exactly. Alien re-resurrected. Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
So all those, big fancy studios that listen to our podcast.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm very curious though what the Alien film coming out this year is going to be like. Directed by
Mm.
Fede Alvarez, Alien Romulus. So we'll see if
Mm.
now that it's finally not a cis white dude behind the directing helm, what's going to happen.
Mm.
Yeah.
If we'll kind of draw out some of these themes better than we've seen.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That would be very interesting. Yeah, I
We'll
can't
cover
wait
it on
till
the
y'all watch
podcast.
Alien Covenant. Because that has, I don't think it's a good film. I think it's a bad film. But I think that's another one that has moments of like, this could be interesting. And then we don't do that.
And then not. Yeah.
Yeah.
That tracks.
Yeah. Especially with
Um.
the two Davids. That scene, we're talking about like some erotic undertones, some homoerotic undertones, where they're like,
Right.
"Yes, this is how you do the fingering of the flute," and it's like,
Yeah.
okay, this is
Okay.
interesting, especially
Yeah,
since David was like Lawrence of Arabia in the first movie. Anyway,
Yeah.
I have. You'll get there, Emily. David is the
okay.
most interesting character from the Prometheus and Alien Covenant part of the series, by far.
Yes. 100%.
Okay. I believe you. Speaking of alien stuff.
Are we going to do our alien lore?
Yeah. So we've been tracking. This started because we were tracking in. It's actually started with our Twilight vampire season when we were tracking vampire lore, but we were doing Star Wars lore, and so we're doing alien lore, and then discovered that there's AI in the Alien franchise, so it's alien lore. Because we're clever.
I respect it.
Yep.
I respect it.
So some of the new thing, there's a bunch of new stuff that happens that we learn about alien and AI lore in this movie, right? That the clones of someone who has had an alien parasite make the human more alien and alien more human, at least in reproduction and like maybe intentionality and thinking, which we already mentioned, but like, yeah, it's just weird. And that you can't even clone a person, and that like somewhere in there, not just that it's a clone of them, but that like when an alien implants in you, it messes with all of your DNA immediately, basically. Um, and they're fast learners, at least this present generation of aliens is. And now all of a sudden, a bullet to the skull works, and their head explodes in blood, in like acidy blood.
Yeah.
Right.
That
Which
they're
is,
suddenly significantly less durable
yeah.
because it took a lot of
Is that just because we
high-powered
wanted to
weapons.
splash more acid everywhere, or
I think
Right.
they just wanted a cool kill because it doesn't make any sense with what we've established in the series so far.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
One thing that is actually in the
mhm.
novelization, I learned this because I looked up the movie on TV tropes as well, just to see.
Mm.
Apparently, in the novelization, the aliens can read the English label next to the little button that sprays the liquid nitrogen. So apparently, the aliens
Oh,
know how to read English in the novelization.
interesting. Now
Wow.
I really want to read this. I'm very curious about
Yeah.
this novelization.
Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Also, alien grandbabies are susceptible to vacuum holes, and it functions a bit like a reverse mouse. It's like a mouse. If the mouse can fit their head in any hole, their whole body can go. So this is like a reverse that. Their head somehow magically like is able to go out the hole because the rest of their body already did.
Yep.
I feel like that scene actually was weirdly emotionally affecting, mostly because the alien baby was like, "No!" and was like
Yeah.
actually yelling words. That was
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable.
And you could see the
Right.
eyes, and the eyes got big, which is to
And
say
like the
they just
look
got
of
lit up.
betrayal, the look
Mm-hmm.
of betrayal to its mother as well. It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah,
oh
when
my
it
god.
realized what was happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's true.
Uh, and then we also have weird xenomorph human hybrids that go both ways. There's like the one that's Ripley, which
Mm-hmm.
is like a human, mostly human, but also have some alien aspects, some xenomorph aspects.
Mm-hmm.
There's almost like a hive mind because she can literally
Mhm.
sense like what they're doing. And then we
Mm-hmm.
have the xenomorph side of things, where they're now weirdly intelligent. One of them can now give birth just to live alien babies.
Right, like you do.
Yeah, and whatever was happening with the alien human hybrid at the end, I still don't know what the deal with that was.
Nobody does.
That
Nobody does.
yeah. So there's that. Another
Yeah.
piece, if we're talking about AI, we find
Mm-hmm.
out that there was, I guess, an
Mm.
android uprising, and now there are very few of them
Yeah.
Yeah.
left. And I guess they
Right.
burned
I
out.
want that story too.
Yeah.
Right.
Again, why if more of this movie should be about Call? Like,
Right.
yeah, and like, what
And
is?
also,
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
oh, and the alien uprising somehow led them all to the few that survived decided to all deactivate their Wi-Fi abilities. Apparently, I wonder what that was about too. Like why that specifically needed to be deactivated for them to continue.
I guess if you have
So they
like an
wouldn't be linked
intelligent,
into the Cybus network like in Doctor Who with the Cybermen,
yeah, I guess it
obviously.
just makes them more of a threat. That would be my thinking,
Mm-hmm.
is like if you had a
Yeah.
person who had like the ability to just connect instantly to any Wi-Fi system and theoretically also control it, like could hack it and control it.
Mm-hmm.
That person is somebody you don't want to upset. Like that's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
power for one
And it
person to
seems
have.
like, yeah, and it seems like this generation of AI that is the like AI created AI from the uprising also is one that like actually has some sort of ethical guide. They have ethics. Like they are humane, and whether it's programmed into them or what, but like there is actually like some sort of ethical guide that they follow, moral guide that they follow of how to exist. And so like it's possible that like they decided not to do the Wi-Fi connection because it's not ethical
Yeah.
to just be able to immediately take over everything all the time. I don't know.
I
I don't
cannot
know.
wait for us to get to Prometheus and Covenant, Emily, for this conversation about the AI because I feel like the past four movies we've just been skimming the surface. It really kind of takes the front seat
Mm-hmm.
going forward.
Yeah. I will give a hot take. I think David should have been even more of a protagonist in the first Prometheus. I think it should have been
Mm.
mostly about him.
Huh.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think if they were going to keep it in line with the other Alien movies, I actually think, and it would have been a switch because all the androids we've seen, other than Call, have been men. It would have been really interesting to see if instead of it being a man, they had cast a woman in that role, and had
Mm-hmm.
David's character instead be a woman android, who still is like the focus of the film. Anyway, that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Well,
That'd be right.
I guess we can rate this movie and talk about our favorite kills. So this
Mm-hmm.
for this season, we are rating our alien films with alien jazz hands because at least in the first three movies, there's a scene where the alien will pop out somewhere and go like this.
yeah.
So that's why we're rating it. I don't think that happened in this movie, sadly,
Yeah,
but
I didn't see it. But would you like to go first, Jeremy, with your
yeah,
rating?
out of 10
Sure.
alien jazz hands.
Yeah. This movie had, if you'd taken some of the pieces here and reworked it heavily, this movie had the potential to be, I think, a really interesting,
Mm-hmm.
potential classic. It could
Yeah.
absolutely have earned its place with especially the first two movies in the franchise. As it is,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I might go like
It did
a
not.
3 alien jazz hands out of 10. Like there are some fun scenes.
Yeah.
If you like Ron
Yeah.
Perlman, you get to see Ron Perlmaning it up, big time. If you like, I don't know, do you like body horror? If you like cool action heroes, there's a little bit in here for most people.
There's a
So
little bit for everybody, but not enough for anybody to be satisfied.
100%.
Ooh, I like
That is
that.
a
Yes.
yes. I hard agree. Yeah, it's not a
Mhm.
good film. I don't like it. I think it's pretty much trash, and I wish it didn't exist. So I'm gonna give it a 3 out of 10 for whatever strengths it has. It that gets it to a 3.
Solid, solid.
Yeah. And do you have a favorite kill?
Yes. So I have a top 3. My third
Okay.
place is when the guy gets frozen by the liquid nitrogen, and like he backs up into the wall, and he sees his arm freezing. He tries to go shoot the alien. His whole arm breaks off. Like you
Yep.
see the skin of his face just cracking off. Like it's gross. It's horrific. It's a little campy and over
Mhm.
the top, but honestly, it's
Yeah.
gross and shocking enough that it works for
Yeah.
me, especially in this movie. That's my third place. Second place is just the alien hybrid for no reason whacking its mother's face off immediately after being born, and just killing
Right.
her inexplicably. Just, what was that? And then number one is definitely when the random prisoner guy uses his own chest burster to kill the evil military guy. I was like, at least that guy gets got. That's a creative way.
Yes.
Honestly, that's really creative. I'm
Yeah.
here for it. That was cool.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Pace, do you want to go next?
Yes.
You
Emily
don't
typically
have to.
needs to go last so they can hear what everybody else rates before they can rate.
I'm very indecisive. I'm non-binary. I'm bisexual. It's all the things.
Yeah. So I would say I was going to rate this a 4, but I think I'm going to agree with you, Jeremy. It's a 3. 3 jazz hands. Yeah. Uh, Not good. All the same reasons. It's kind of trash. There's some pieces there that could be good, but just failed to deliver. So all the reasons. And I will agree with your top favorite death. The chestburster scene where the prisoner used the chestburster to kill the dude. Like, very cool scene. Very bloody. Love all of it. So that's mine. What about you, Emily?
Okay. Well, we are. I have lots of echo from you, Pace. Just we are 3 for 3. I'm also giving it. I thought about giving it a 2.5, but y'all are delightful, and so I gave it a 3. 3 for 3. So even with 3 separate ratings, it still does not reach past up to 10. Yeah, it's just the only redeeming quality is like Ripley and Call, that they exist, and Christy. Like, there are some good things, but there's so much awful, and the number of times throughout the movie I was like, I hate all these men. I hate them. And like, I'm supposed to hate them, but then they're supposed to die.
Yes. Yes.
So the one person who was on my list of potential favorite kills throughout the entire movie was also the guy who dies by chestburster. The guy who is killed by the chestburster. That guy was on my list to die. He was on my list, and I was like, this is potentially my favorite kill before he even died, right? Like, that's, I just like, now when I watch these movies, I'm like, who's going to be my favorite kill? However, I will do 2 honorable mentions. One is Christy, because he knows that the other guy can live if he goes down with the alien, and he's willing to do that. And I think it sucks, and I think it especially sucks because this is the second movie in a row where the black guy sacrifices himself for any number of other people. And also, it was really cool, and he's a really cool character. The other honorable mention is the alien who dies so the other alien can escape, which in the version of like Ripley's, in the version that we're going to produce someday, that's a thing we'd cheer. We'd be like, yes, you got out of the like thing, you're so clever, blah blah blah. You probably didn't have to completely kill them, you could have just like strategically cut yourselves, but go to it.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are my so we all had like essentially the same top and rating, but
Yeah. Oh, how cool would the alternate version of this be if Ripley goes to see the alien, like she somehow managed to get out, and she sees the aliens in captivity and shows them like with her own blood dissolving part of the ship, and they're like, and they just like slice open their hands and start like spread, like, yo, that would be a sick scene. That would actually be really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd be here for it. I had one half jump scare. I was like, there were 2 places where I could have jump scared, and I had one half jump scare. So I was texting Base about it. I was like, is this like, I didn't jump, but everything inside me did? And I did not gasp, which is the main indicator of jump scare for me. But I was like, is this that I'm getting better? at predicting these. Is it a half a jump scare? And Pace, as Pace said, false binary. It's both. So, half jump scare, and I'm getting better at my. We watched it at night, even.
Ooh.
You did?
I don't know.
I have a question, 2 questions. Number 1, how do we feel that the Alien franchise, as well as I think basically every single of the, like all of the most popular, beloved, influential sci-fi franchises, with the arguable exception of Blade Runner, if you call it a full franchise, has more bad movies than good? Alien basically has 2 like good movies. Predator maybe has like 2 good movies, like Predator and Prey. I feel like those are the 2 that it's like, these are good. Star Wars, I think most people would agree, at least has as many bad movies as good, if not more. Or at least mediocre movies. Terminator hasn't had a good movie since Terminator 2, arguably. How does that feel to like have, because this is the 4th movie in the franchise. I'm guessing, did you all, how did you like, I'm guessing you didn't like Alien 3, the theatrical cut. Did you rate Alien 3, the assembly cut, like highly, or was it just like better overall?
Actually, yeah.
Okay, that's fair.
I rated that one pretty highly.
Around a 7 or something.
I think it's a fair score.
Yeah.
I'd go like 6 or 6.7, somewhere around there for that one.
Yeah.
But like Prometheus, Alien Covenant, Alien Resurrection, like some.
It feels like.
Yeah, but we never did it. Stuff like that.
If you ever do Midnight Mass, can I please come back? Because that's one of my favorite shows.
Yes.
That's
absolutely.
I could talk for a long time about that movie, about that show. It's so good. Like,
okay, hypothetically speaking.
Yes, hypothetically.
If Nerds at Church was to do a season on superheroes, would you want a Spider-Man episode?
Ooh.
And would you want to be a guest on it?
Yo, 100%. Yeah, for any of the Spider-Man movies.
Can I be on the Superman one though? I mean, look at my tattoo.
Yeah. Superman's my second favorite superhero. He's so good.
He's my first. Spider-Man's my second. Look at us being reversed.
High five. Way to go. Right. I always say if a person doesn't like Superman, it's probably because they haven't read good Superman stories. Superman's an incredible character.
They probably just watch the shit movies because nobody knows how to make a good Superman movie, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Since Richard Donner, apparently, who made like 2 of them.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I would love to come back.
Our
and
next
talk about
season,
Spider-Man.
we just decided on our next season, and it's superheroes.
So
that's what I was like. This is perfection.
Yes,
I'm just gonna bounce you back and forth, Jeremy.
Yeah, bounce me over there. If you ever do Midnight Mass, bounce me back. It is one of it. Oh, as like a person of faith, that movie felt so like affirming. Like I've never had emotions in that area like that from a horror movie. The closest I've ever gotten was maybe weirdly Stop Making Sense when they do Once in a Lifetime, in the concert film, the Talking Heads concert film Stop Making Sense, which I'm getting way off topic. I won't talk about that, but it's Midnight Mass, the depiction of church culture and of faith and of religion and of doubt and like reconciling all of those things. Oh man.
Yeah, I think Mike Flanagan is so under. I mean, I feel like he's pretty popular, but I still feel like even so, I think he's a little underrated in just how some of the themes that he's able to pull out. Like, people hated Doctor Sleep, and I don't know why. I feel like the themes of that movie are so good.
Yeah.
I think it's probably just because people compare it to The Shining, and nothing can compare to The Shining, really.
Yeah, but I agree. I think Doctor
Staircase.
Sleep is awesome.
Yeah. Well, we are almost at our 2.5 hour mark. I love it. So, where can our listeners find you if they want to check out you, any of your projects, anything upcoming?
Yeah, you can find me at Jeremy Cobb 1. That's Cobb with 2 B's and the number 1 on Twitter and Blue Sky, and at the Cobbmeister on Instagram. And I also stream Casual Quest Live on Twitch, where I am not a gamer and I'm trying to become one. So I'm playing a lot of classic games.
Nice.
Yeah, both old and new.
Have you played any new games?
Yes. Right now we're doing Baldur's Gate 3, Baldur's Gate 3 playthrough, and Disco Elysium. We're doing both of those.
Ooh.
And then because as of this recording, Akira Toriyama just died yesterday, we may actually start doing Chrono Trigger for a little bit as well. Because I've played most of Chrono Cross because I dated somebody who loved the game Chrono Cross, but I've never played Chrono Trigger. So I'm excited to try that one
Yeah,
out as well.
love it.
Yeah.
Nice.
Oh,
I honestly
go ahead. Sorry.
had not seen that Akira Toriyama died until like 10 minutes before recording this podcast. It showed up in my, I've not been on social media much lately, so it showed up in my feed when I was quick checking. I was like, oh my God, really? And then it's like, oh, wait, crap, I need to record. Can't feel these emotions yet.
Yeah.
So
if you don't know who he was,
maybe after this, I'm going to watch some.
Yeah, if you don't know who he was, he's the writer of and artist for Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z.
Oh.
He was like the major creative force behind that whole franchise. So yeah, he was only 68 too. He really wasn't that old. And he was still working on more Dragon Ball stuff, I think, when he died. But I will also once again shout out Three Black Halflings, which is a TTRPG podcast that I do where we talk about inclusivity and diversity in all in TTRPGs as well as all areas of the nerd sphere. We have interviews with all sorts